Chapter 81. Do Ye Fire Dragon Festival. The next day, the villagers of Date Village were all happily making final preparations. Lord Navy, please have a meal in the village at noon. The official sacrifice is about to start, and the food is ready. Jim Village Chief smiled and invited Mo Lee and others. Different from Jimmy's worry, Lee and Sanchin are like nothing happened, they should play and eat. Okay, don't worry, the village chief, we will give you the money. Lee nodded and said. Village Chief Jim grinned and waved his hand quickly. No, this is an invitation, not a business, so please enjoy the delicious food and watch our sacrificial activities. Okay, Lee Kie said to Jim with a smile. Lee Mo took a group of Navy soldiers to the edge of the village square, watching the villagers assemble a mighty fire dragon from huge cloth carts while eating. Of course there is also an evil and ugly big black snake. Do you want to perform a fire dragon to defeat the black snake? Sanchin asked. You are so smart, Lee Mo said. Hey, how come it doesn't sound like a good word? Sanchin looked at Mo Lee with dissatisfaction. You're so smart. Mo Lee glanced at Sanchian in surprise, his tone intensified. Are you laughing at me? Sanchin gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words between his teeth. You're so smart, Before Mo Lee could finish speaking, Sanchian directly put the bread in his hand into Mo Lee's mouth. Eat more and keep your stinky mouth shut. Lee Mo shrugged and ate the bread in a few bites. Some people were happy and some were sad. At this time, Yuhu sat quietly in the middle of the mountain beside the abyss, looking up at Shuya's big head. Yuhu said, maybe it won't come at all, just like the past 200 years. The same. His tilde. The black snake Shuyi spat out a letter and stared at Yuhu with vertical pupils. Even if you come, as long as you don't go out, won't you be fine? Yuhu finally tried his best to convince Shoei. His tilde. Shuyi spit out the letter, the huge snake head, and slowly descended, knowing that he was completely submerged in the darkness of the abyss. The villagers, preparations have been completed, and when the time is up, the village chief ignites the fire and starts the activity. A large white boat docked from the beach on the west side of Date Village, and 8 people got off the boat, all of them wearing large white sheets and funny masks. The time is limited, so there is no need to investigate, just send a signal and let that beast come over, said the man with the sunflower mask in the lead. Yes, Captain. The man with the bull's head mask behind him used a sound, then took out a small phone bug and said to him, let's go. Captain, Rear Admiral Mo Lee and his subordinates are also on this island. Could it be that he did it? One of them stepped forward to the captain and asked in a low voice. The captain was silent for a moment, then said, Mo Lee is someone the adults look up to. The value of all of us is not as important as him, so don't say such things in the future. Yes. Let's go, hurry up to complete the task, those lunatics are still waiting to build an arsenal on this island. After saying that, the captain led the 7 people into the woods. Meanwhile, a volcano on an island on the Great Root erupted without warning, scalding lava from the crater and sending ash into the clouds. Roar. With a roar, a huge fire dragon climbed up the crater and stepped on the hot magma, its wings spread out behind its back, and the magma sticking on its fleshy wings scattered. The fire dragon shook the dragon head with 2 dragon horns, and his angry vertical pupils looked around, and suddenly roared in one direction. Roar. The wings vibrated, and the huge body slowly lifted into the air. After circling twice in the crater, it flew away at an extremely fast speed in the direction of the roar just now. In the abyss of the mountain peak of Kawaji Island, the pair of scarlet vertical pupils of the black snake Shuyi were bright red, and the huge snake mouth spit black and purple poisonous mist. People in Date Village have already started ritual activities. A tall 4-wheeled vehicle decorated with flame patterns, a large white umbrella on the roof, and a 1-meter-high wood-carving flame-flying dragon placed under the umbrella. 12 people walked around the 4-wheeled vehicle, and a dozen people in front were pulling a thick rope tied to the front of the vehicle. There was a group of people behind the car, holding fire dragons and black snakes made of silk, flying up and down to perform. The villagers were immersed in the sacrificial performance. Sanchin suddenly moved his eyes slightly, leaned sideways to Mo Li, and said in a low voice, "There are 8 people in the woods on the west side, they should be with the 2 people you killed." Li Mo nodded slightly, put down the food in his hand, lit a cigarette, took a breath and said, "I'll go first to see what they're going to do, I'll leave it to you here." Okay, Sanchin agreed, and then turned his attention to the sacrificial activities. Seeing Mo Li get up and leave, Jimmy sat in Li Qian's place and asked in a low voice to San Qian, "Is someone here again?" "Well, it's okay, leave it to him. We just do what we should do." Sanchin nodded and said softly. Jimmy was stunned for a moment. At this time, 3000 gave her the feeling that her husband was going out to do errands, and his wife had a solid sense of stability behind her. The soft voice contained a firmness that could not be rejected. In the woods on the west side of Yida village, one of them saw Mo Li walking towards this side. He was a little nervous. After all, the loss of contact between the two was most likely caused by this man. He said nervously to the person in front of him, "Captain, Major General Mo Li is here." The captain said calmly, "For a strong man like him, it's hard not to be discovered by him when we spy here." As soon as Mo Li walked into the woods, a few people stood up from behind the trees. Looking at their attire, Mo Li squinted. This group of people was indeed the same as the 2 people from last night. "Major General Mo Li, hello." The first person greeted Mo Li. "Do you and those 2 belong to the same department?" Li Qian asked. As soon as Mo Li said this, the 8 people on the opposite side were stunned for a while, and then one of them stood up and asked in a cold voice, "What did you do to them?" Mo Li pouted, raised his right hand, and wiped his neck. "You, how dare you kill our people? Hey, who are you? Why don't I dare to kill?" Mo Li smiled disdainfully. The captain raised his hand to stop the anger of the people behind him. He said flatly, "We are both organizations under the world government, but we are an espionage organization, CP0. He continued, "Major General Li, the superior appreciates you, so we will not hold you accountable, but you must help us complete this mission." Mission. Mo Li's eyes moved slightly. He remembered the last paragraph of the handbook, which was the mission of their trip. While eliminating the black snake Shoei, erase the map marker of Kawaji Island, waiting for the person who takes over. Close black lens bracket. That's right, while killing the black giant snake, erase this island from the map and hide it, the captain said. Mo Li exhaled and said softly, "How to erase? How to hide?" The captain said, "Help the fire dragon to defeat the black snake." Chapter 82, Dragon Flying Snake Dance. "That fire dragon was raised by your master, right?" Li asked. The man didn't seem to like the word, master, very much. His tone was not as calm as before. He said solemnly, "It was raised by adults and is a loyal slave." He continued, "Major General Mo Li saw that handbook, right? Look, I have to criticize you for putting such an important thing on your body. What if someone dies one day and is taken away?" Li said frivolously. "Then why did Major General Mo Li kill them?" "They terrorized me, threatened me." "Just like that?" the man asked in disbelief. Mo Li's face sank when he heard the words, "Is that just that? Are these guys too crazy? Oh, beat him. Victory. Oh." The village square remembered the high-pitched cheers. The villagers held up the fire dragon made of cloth silk to defeat the black snake, and threw the black snake made of the same black cloth into the fire. Everyone gathered around the bonfire and cheered with wine glasses. A behemoth in the distance is rapidly approaching. "Dad, what do you see that is?" A little boy pulled his father's clothes, pointed at the fiery red flying towards him in the sky, raised his hand and shouted. "Ah, what?" The boy's father looked in the direction the boy was pointing. After a few seconds, his eyes widened and he exclaimed, "Chief Jim. Fire Dragon Do Ye." Village Chief Jim, who was about to drink with a glass of wine, suddenly shouted, which not only startled him, but also some people around him looked at him. "Fire Dragon, Do Ye. It turns out that it really exists. The village chief. The man pointed at the approaching fire dragon and shouted excitedly. When he shouted like this, everyone looked up, and sure enough, a huge fire dragon flew towards this side with vibrating wings. Oh, fire dragon leaves. It's really coming, do ye? The Navy also looked at the fire dragon flying in the sky in shock. Sanchin frowned and stood up. Captain Binkata, when there is danger later, you should pay attention to protecting civilians. After that, he turned to look at Jimmy, and said solemnly, Jimmy, you have to cooperate with me later. Jimmy also nodded solemnly. Well, don't worry, I have been exercising recently. As soon as Jimmy finished his words, the fire dragon Dai, who had already flown over Date Village, fluttered his wings and roared. Roar. The roar of the fire dragon shook the world, and under the powerful pressure, the villagers of Ida Village were speechless in shock. They had never seen the god who saved Kawaji Island 200 years ago. They have seen only handed-down documents and oral legends of dragons and snakes. Now seeing the real giant dragon, that shocking heart is trembling. The dragon god has come to the world. This is our dragon god. Village Chief Jim woke up from the shock, threw away his crutches, and opened his arms to shout at the fire dragon in the sky. The surrounding villagers watched Jim like this, and they all followed suit. Dragon god is born. Dragon god. The fire dragon slowly descended, and its wings fluttered above the villagers. The hurricane carried by its wings knocked down many villagers. The terrifying head of the fire dragon, the terrifying sharp teeth and fangs, the dense fiery red scales, and the huge wings that cover the sky, all impact the hearts of the Ida villagers. Just as everyone stood still, the huge dragon head of the fire dragon was raised high, and the dragon mouth overflowed with red flames. Sanchin's eyes narrowed and he said in a deep voice, Jimmy, protect everyone. Roar. Boom. The dragon spewed out fiery flames that were about to sweep the entire Ida village. Ah! Why, our dragon god! Seeing the flames and dragon breath rushing down the sky, the villagers shouted in horror, and just when everyone was desperate, they only heard a coquettish shout. Lulu breaking a great river. With Jimmy's shout, the earth trembled, and the mud and sand beneath everyone's feet rose like waves, forming a huge mud vault to block the dragon's flaming breath. Good job, Jimmy, Sanchin shouted, his small body leaping high against the dragon's flames. Penetrate. In the sight of the sea soldiers, Limo and CP0 in the woods, they were shocked. 3001 leapt into the sky, penetrated the flame, penetrated the dragon head, and stood between the two dragon horns of the dragon head. 4 consecutive nail punches. 3000 stood on the dragon's head, his white right hand clenched into a fist, his armed color was domineering, and he bombarded the dragon's head with 4 extremely fast fists. It's hard to imagine what kind of power 3000's small body contains to knock down the huge fire dragon nearly 200 meters long. Seeing Sanchin's amazing performance, Li Kie couldn't help grinning. He looked back at the CP0 crowd, and said with a smile, the girl in my family has grown up and knows how to take responsibility. Then his tone turned cold. I should also deal with you guys. What did you say? Bang. At some point, Li Kie stood beside the person who was speaking and inserted his index finger into the person's temple. I'm sorry, I'm really not good at fancy battles. The process may be a bit boring, please bear with me. Watching Mo Li instantly kill his comrades, the other 7 were frightened, and at the same time, they each performed 6 moves, and their abilities changed into various animal forms. Mo Li, you are provoking the world government. Li Kie said indifferently, it's just provocative, what's the matter? Whoosh. Mo Li disappeared in place. However, it was said that the huge body of the flame dragon was accompanied by flames, which ignited the forest. The flame dragon roared, and its angry vertical pupils stared fiercely at the tiny human standing on the ground. Roar. The huge dragon claws pressed down on the 3000 on the ground, and the sharp dragon claws could kill the 3000 with just one blow. Sanchin calmly looked at the dragon claw that was smashing. His legs were wronged, and he jumped up. Penetrate. 3,000 people jumped in front of the dragon's chest through the dragon's claws. The slender right leg condensed the domineering look of armed force, twisted his body, and kicked the dragon's chest with one kick. Heavy hammer. 3,000 once asked Molly why Molly didn't have a name for his moves when he was fighting. But Molly's answer was that he never used any moves, either slashing or stabbing, and there were no swordsmanship moves. But Molly named Sanchian's fighting methods, such as nail fist, sickle leg, hammer strike and so on. Although Sanchin was very resistant to these bad names, he still adopted it. 3,001 hits of the heavy hammer knocked the dragon over. Roar. The giant dragon fell to the ground, roaring and spewing out the dragon's breath of flame. In the forest on the west side, Molly stepped on the dying CP0 captain under his feet and looked at the 3,000 violent fire dragons from a distance. Oh, the girl has grown up. Look at that punch and kick, it's really exciting. Suddenly, the largest mountain on Kawaji Island, the black giant snake in the abyss, appeared in front of everyone. Yeah. The giant snake was entrenched on the top of the high mountain. The huge snake head was raised high, and its eyes were scarlet. It stared at the fire dragon Duyi, and made a roar that resounded throughout the island. Fire dragon Duyi saw the black snake Shuyi appearing on the top of the peak. It threw 3,000 away suddenly, flew into the air, and the whole body was full of fire, roaring at the giant snake that was entrenched on the highest mountain. Roar. Yeah. Brothers 800 years ago, enemies of life and death 800 years later. Dragon flying snake dance, start fighting. Chapter 83, Flying and Slaying Dragons. The dragons and snakes confronted each other, sighing in the sky, the black giant snake entrenched on the mountain peak, the flaming dragon flying in the sky, 800 years of momentum, 200 years of hatred. Roar. Yeah. The whole sky echoed with two different roars. The dragon's breath of flame burst out, and it was about to burn the enemy in front of him. Not to be outdone, the strong poison gas spit at the dragon in the face of the fire. Scoff tilde tilde tilde. The fire was burning with poison gas, and the two attacks were cancelled out in an instant, and the poisonous mist after the poison gas burned covered the entire mountain. Roar. The flame dragon spread its wings, and the two dragon claws swooped down. Boom. The giant dragon pounced on the black snake on the mountain peak. The snake scales as hard as gold and iron were fragile in front of the dragon claws like hooked knives. Yeah. The black snake Shoei roared into the sky, and then the big mouth full of fangs and fangs slammed into the flame of the flying dragon's neck. Wing. Boom, boom, boom. The hollow mountain can no longer withstand the ravages of the two giant beasts. The boulders rolled down, and the mountain collapsed. Run. The mountain is falling. Run. The villagers of Yamashita Date Village shouted and ran away. Jimmy. Sanchin hurriedly shouted as he watched the boulders falling from the mountain. I know. Jimmy shouted, kneeling on the ground and shouting loudly, Lulu Tuhei wall. The earth flowed rapidly, and a tall and heavy earth wall was erected at the foot of the mountain to block the falling boulders. Limo looked at Jimmy's performance, nodded, and then said to the half-dead CP0 under his feet, My people are very powerful, right? Major General Mo Lee, what do you want? The man insisted and said. Mo Lee bit his cigar and watched the tragic dragon-snake battle. He said, Can you tell me what you want from this island? The man struggled for a few breaths and whispered, No comment. Mo Lee exhaled and continued. Dragon, snake, it doesn't matter, what do you want is this large island? Feeling that the man under his feet was dead, Li Kie sighed and murmured, Human, it's really fragile, our tiki is interesting, where is he? The villagers of Date Village have been moved to the side of the warship in the port. Village Chief Jim knelt on the ground, watching the two giant beasts fighting in the mountains in the distance, and muttered to himself, Why does our dragon god attack us? The villagers behind them also fell to the ground one by one, looking sad. For them, Fire Dragon Dai is their belief. It was Fire Dragon who defeated Black Snake, saved their ancestors, and saved Kawaji Island. But why did their faith attack them? The collapse of the faithful faith made everyone in Date Village close to breaking their nerves. It's not like that. The hero who guards Date Village and Kawaji Island is not the Fire Dragon Duyi. It's the Black Shuyi. Suddenly, a childish roar attracted everyone's attention. The village chief Jim, who was in tears, looked around. Yoo-hoo, what are you talking about? At this time, Yoo-hoo had tears on his cheeks. He watched the black snake Shoei being burned by the flames of the fire dragon in the collapsed mountain, and the snake's body was pierced by the dragon's claws. He couldn't help shouting anymore. Our family has always known, always knew. It's the black snake Shoei who was guarding Kawaji Island. 200 years ago, it wasn't Shoei eating people, it was Shoei saving people from human traffickers. All my great-grandfathers were IC. The legend of Shuyi and Duyi is false. The fire dragon Duyi is evil. It's our family. We have been shamelessly praying to Shuyi to protect Date Village on the day the giant dragon attacks every year. It's us who have been hurting Shuyi's heart. After shouting, Yoo-hoo collapsed on his knees and cried. Everyone who was stunned by Yoo-hoo's shouting stared blankly at the black snake that was fighting with the fire dragon. This is 200 years of irony. Village Chief Jim beat the ground with his fists and shouted angrily. The village chief. It turns out that we have been misunderstanding the black giant snake for 200 years. The villagers of Ida Village cried out in remorse. Between several peaks in Kawaji Island, two giant beasts were still biting each other. Although the fire dragon cannot be suppressed by the giant snake on its wings, its powerful limbs and sharp front claws give the fire dragon an advantage in battle. The black snake Shuyi could only rely on his sturdy body to tie the fire dragon tightly. The poisonous gas permeated, and the two fangs frantically bit the dragon's neck. At this time, the fire dragon was covered in gas flames, and the venom poured into the body by the black snake was continuously burned and transpired. Every time the two giant beasts collided, every time they fell to the ground of Kawaji Island was shaken, and the forest had been destroyed by the two giant beasts. Wow, from this angle, these two guys seem to be bigger. Back. Sanchianchong smiled at Mo Li. Well, I'm back. Mo Li nodded, looked at the two giant beasts, and said, the big black snake seems to be losing. 3000 nodded and said, the fire dragon's claws are deadly. Tisk tisk tisk. Minions, there are claws and teeth. Mo Li tisk tisk, and as soon as he finished speaking, he felt someone tugging at his pants. Looking down, it was the boy Yoo-hoo, looking at himself with tears on his face. What are you doing? Lord Navy, please, save Shuyi. Yoo-hoo knelt on the ground, pulling on Mo Li's trouser legs, begging for Mo Li. Lord Navy, please, save Shuyi. Lord Navy. At this time, the village chief Jimmy stooped, walked up to Mo Li, bowed slowly, and said with a pharynx, Lord Navy, the old man knows that you are in a difficult situation. After all, you are a fire dragon, but your subordinates are so powerful that you want to be a commander. You must be stronger. Please, save our friend. Quote. Please, Lord, save our friend. Lord Navy. Limo smiled and patted Yoo-hoo's head. Said laughingly. Okay. At this time, Fire Dragon Duyi had beaten the black snake to the brink of death, broke free from the shackles of the black snake, and flew into the sky. Roar. The fire dragon roared in the sky, declaring its victory. Mo Li looked at the flying dragon roaring in the sky, and asked Jimmy thoughtlessly, are there any mushrooms? Jimmy was taken aback by the question, what? Li Qiye didn't answer, but held the saber on his waist and bent his knees slightly. Bang! Mo Li smashed the ground under his feet and quickly flew towards the fire dragon in the air. In midair, Mo Li drew his sword and flashed, the snow-white sword light flashed, and a huge half-moon-shaped slash slashed across the neck of the fire dragon. Flying and slaying the demon dragon, the sword chi broke through the sky. Mowgli's knife cut off the 800-year love-hate bond between dragons and snakes, cut off the 200-year persistence of the Yuhu family, and cut off the 200-year regret and despair of the people of Kawaji Island. Mowgli put away the knife and stood on the roof, facing the ruins after the dragon-snake battle, and behind the unaffected town. The sun was shining, the breeze was blowing slightly, and the two words behind it were reflected in everyone's eyes. Chapter 84, Naval Heroes. Limo and Yuhu sat side by side on a big rock. Looking at the large black snake more than 200 meters long coiled in the mountain col, and the scar that was scratched by the fire dragon showed bright red muscles, Mowgli couldn't help sighing, it must be very chewy. Yuhu looked at the black snake Shuya's injury with distress, and asked in a low mood, Lord Navy, when will Shuya's injury heal? Limo glanced at him. How do I know? I'm not a veterinarian. Yuhu nodded, and remembered the scene of Mowgli's dashing beheading of the dragon just now. Yuhu's eyes suddenly sparkled, staring at Mowgli, looking left and right. Lord Navy, how can you be so powerful? You killed the fire dragon with one knife. Oh, just practice. Motion absent-mindedly perfunctory. Yuhu secretly pouted. Do you really take me as a child? Mowgli went down the mountain by himself, squatting with a little boy to watch a long worm, and he was also free. After cutting down the fire dragon, Li Kie started to study how to eat this big lizard with wings. If you follow the teaching steps, pinch the head to the tail and wash it clean, find a bigger pot, boil the water, and do the seasoning. But Jimmy seems to have a tastier way of doing it. Li also gave up the idea of cooking mushroom-stewed flying dragon. Life is not bad now, without the slightest bit of precaution, without the slightest worry, unexpectedly comfortable. Li Kie sat on the big chair on the stupid back, biting a cigar and waiting for Jimmy to call for dinner. Mo tilde tilde mo tilde tilde. Huh. Limo looked strangely at the big tortoise Benben and kicked the turtle's shell. Big Ben, what is your name? Benben turned his head, hanging dead fish eyes, biting a cigar, and said in a loud voice, Mo tilde tilde. Mowgli suddenly realized that he quickly took out his lighter and lit the stupid cigar. Big stupid, you are really awesome, and I have to light a cigarette for you, which means you are more dragged. Look at Xiaoduding, who has the same family status as you, and is still squatting next to the cauldron, like a fool. Fire! Suddenly, Mowgli's face was full of black lines, and he shouted angrily, Jimmy! Look at the little beanies. Her arms are about to burn. Jimmy, who was slicing the meat, was stunned for a moment, and when he turned around, he saw that Kumik had come under the cauldron to add firewood to the fire, and the hand that added the firewood was blackened by the flames. Jimmy quickly grabbed the back of Kumik's neck and slapped him when he picked it up. You son of a bitch, you're just a piece of wood, can you play with fire? Kumik turned to look at Jimmy strangely. Kumi. Jimmy's face was full of black lines, and he reached out and smashed Kumik's head back. Kirsten said, the head is not allowed to rotate 180 degrees in the future, can you hear me? Kumik's dazed Dudu's eyes suddenly showed a shrewd energy, shaking his little head. Kumi tilde. Limo looked at the friendly interaction between the two, and nodded with relief. What a harmonious family. What surprised Limo most was that after the fire dragon died, the villagers quickly burned everything related to the fire dragon die with lightning speed. And at a very fast speed, he made a statue of a black snake trimming leaves, and the statue on the four-wheeled vehicle was also replaced by a black snake with a hissing face on a mountain peak. The clothes and accessories worn by the priests were all changed to black. Limo was speechless at the shock of these people's super ability to accept, and could only secretly admire these false believers. Originally, the Dai Fire Dragon Festival became the Shoei Black Snake Festival. It is really powerful enough to accept the transformation from the fire dragon to the giant snake. The thought process is very smooth, and there is no transition at all. The contents of the manuscript are always reassuring. What does waiting for someone to take over mean? Mowgli thought for a while, opened his wrist and got a phone bug, and asked Lao Sa if he had any problems. Blue blue, blue blue. Gotcha. The phone bug instantly turned yellow and looked like a wretched person. Moses, Molly Jun, do you have anything to do with my old husband? Limo looked at the pouting appearance of the phone bug, and it was not difficult to imagine what the yellow monkey looked like now, even though the phone bug had imitated it very hard. Old Saw, I want to ask you something. Oh tilde, is Molly Jun going to ask me a question? It's really rare. Molly resisted the urge to hang up and said, I was on an island and hacked to death several people and a dragon. Kaido. Molly wondered, who? Well, it's okay, you continue to say, what dragon? Limo continued, it was just a big snake and a fire dragon fighting. I pulled aside and hacked the fire dragon to death. Molly's voice fell, and Huang Yuan was silent for a while, and asked, as the big snake called Shuyi, and the fire dragon called Duyi. Molly raised his eyebrows, Yo-he. Lao Sa, so you all know it. In the office, Kazuna put down the teacup, hesitated and said, did you kill a few people? Molly was pleasantly surprised, how do you know? Huang Yuan sighed slightly, Molly Jun, you really can cause trouble. Oh, Lao Sa, you already know it. It is said that it is the secret agency CP0 of the world government. What do you want this island to do? Li asked. Huang Yuan pondered. This matter, you don't need to worry about it, I will handle it. Oh, then I. Gotcha. Grass, how dare you hang up Lao Su's phone? Molly yelled angrily. Molly, it's time to eat, Jimmy's voice sounded. Come on. While Molly and the others were eating the dragon meat, Kizaru had already boarded the warship heading to the Holy Land Mary Joa, and Lieutenant General Crane was with Kizaru. The two bosses stood on the bow, and Lieutenant General he said softly, what Lee has done this time is not easy. With a cigarette in his mouth and looking at the sea nonchalantly, Kazuna said, what is Granny Crane referring to? Lieutenant General Crane glanced at Kizaru without saying a word, obviously not wanting to answer the question that Kiwi asked knowingly. Kizaru took the cigarette in his hand, raised his eyes, and spoke after a long time. When Whitebeard is dead, the balance of the new world has been broken. Those pirates who were suppressed by Whitebeard have lost their shackles and will surely make waves, and the little devils of the extremely evil generation will not be safe. Huang Yuan sucked his cigarette and continued. They won't give up Molly's huge combat power, and the fact that Molly killed Whitebeard has been known to the whole world. He's a naval hero now. Lieutenant General he nodded and asked again, then why did you go to see the 5 old stars this time? Huang Yuan smiled and said, in order to give them a step, they can't be deadlocked here. Lieutenant General Crane folded his arms, looked at Kizaru and said, it's more than that, right? Well who knows? Jimmy, what about vegetarian food? I'm tired of eating meat alone. Molly grabbed the big bone meat with both hands and shouted at Jimmy who was frying the meat in front of him. Got it. Jimmy replied irritably, turned his head and shouted, who is that? Go and bring some meatball soup to Major General Molly. The chef who was called was stunned. Is the meatball soup a vegetarian dish? Chapter 85, Weapon Pan. The dragon meat was also eaten, and the supplies were finished, so Li Kie took the people and evacuated them with the gratitude of the Kawaji people. Everything that happened here has already been reported to Huang Yuan, and the rest is up to the leaders. The Azure Sea is full of sparkling blue waves, like the splendid stars sprinkled from the sky, turning into a majestic splendor on the sea. However, Li Kie had no intention to pay attention to the beauty of nature. Because their warships were riding the wind and waves, and within 3 hours of leaving Kawaji Island, the warships turned on their unmanned self-healing state as if they had taken medicine. The warship didn't know what was being dragged or pushed, like a small jet rocket, sailing at high speed. The Mercedes-Benz warship pressed through waves one after another, and the unstable hull caused the navy on the warship to stagger one by one. Molly leaned on the mast, feeling the passion brought by the speed, and grinned, which one of you installed a turbocharger on the warship? Hearing that Molly was saying something that he didn't understand again, Sanchin helplessly raised his forehead. Mo-Li, this is obviously not normal, right? Li Mo smiled and waved his hand. It's all right, let's see where the warship is going. Is the ship still good? At this time, on the bottom of a certain sea area, two Murlocs were discussing something. One of the hammerhead sharkmen complained to an octopus fishman, Bobosa, it's been so long, is your sucker fish any good? The octopus man Paposa immediately retorted, Core. That's the sucker fish I've been training for many years. The octopus man cow was relieved, and then said with longing, when we grab the ship, we can reform the Sun Pirates, and then we will invite the leader of Jinbei to join us. Paposa also nodded heavily when he heard the words, and said, well. At that time, we will let Jinbei be the deputy captain. Doflamingo is holding a phone bug in the palace of Dressrosa in the New World. The phone bug came out with a suppressed, angry voice. Joker, I'm getting impatient waiting. Doflamingo smiled sullenly. Hum. Kaido, our plan was blocked by one person. Who is it? Hearing Doflamingo say that, Kaido was obviously furious. Doflamingo licked his lips, and under those iconic sunglasses, his eyes flashed a cold streamer. A Navy named Mo-Li. The Navy who killed the white-bearded old man. Yes, it's him. He is very powerful, and a few hours ago, he intervened in the island we were looking for to build an arsenal. Our plan failed, Kaido. Doflamingo said coldly. Navy. Multi-tube Navy. Kaido roared furiously. In the dark room, Doflamingo hung up the phone, looked at the bright sunshine outside the window, and laughed out loud. Fight. Monsters on the sea. If you want war, I'll give you a chance to fight. Navy. Pirates. Kill as much as you like. The warship finally stopped. Except for Mo-Li, who was still smacking his mouth, everyone else was shocked, and even a few sailors vomited while leaning on the railing. What is this? Shouted a Navy lying on the side of the ship, pointing to the underside of the warship. Mo-Li hurried over, looked down, and suddenly wondered, is this a fish? Below the warship, a group of slap-sized fish. The back of the fish are not fins, but densely packed, similar to the suckers on octopus feet. Sanchin leaned on Mo-Li's side and looked down at the same time, and said, they sucked at the bottom of the warship and ran with us, right? Li Mo nodded. It should be. Jimmy also came over with a frying pan and was a little excited. Is there any fish? Li Mo looked at the frying pan in Jimmy's hand. This sister was afraid of being a demon, thinking about cooking all day long. Wow, what kind of fish is this? I haven't seen it before. Jimmy said in surprise. All the Marines, including Li Mo, looked at Jimmy and shook his head. The meaning is obvious, I don't know. Just when a group of people were lying on the side of the boat studying the fish, suddenly a black figure came out of the fish school, holding two big knives in both hands, hand over the boat. This black figure came out of the sea, and when they arrived in front of the crowd, they couldn't even see what the black figure was. When Paposa flew away directly. He never imagined that this person was actually holding a weapon, and he started so quickly and so simply. What the hell? Mo-Li had to slap people away before he could react. I don't know, Major General Mo-Li started too fast. Yeah, I didn't see that either. It seems to be a person, it seems to be talking. Is that so? Mo-Li turned around, turned his back to the sea, looked at a group of Navy, and scratched his head with a smile. Whoa! Another shadow jumped out of the sea and shouted, Bobo! When? The sudden sound startled Mo-Li, and he turned around to find another frying pan. Everyone looked at Mo-Li sluggishly. Li Mo was also deceived and flew away again. Mistakes, I'm not going to fight, let's see if there are any more. Mo-Li smiled embarrassedly, returned the frying pan to Jimmy, and waited for the third one with a group of sailors beside the boat. The shadows came out. But wait, all the little fish scattered, and no third shadow appeared. Binkata thought for a while and said, Major General Moli, maybe 2, no more, let's go. Limo nodded. You're right, maybe just 2. Okay, let's go. Moli left them, and there were 2 flat-faced murlocs floating on the sea in the distance. Cow said in a loud voice, Bobosa, do you see it clearly? Paposa said vaguely, no. Ka nodded, neither did I. Despicable human beings attacked us. At this time, a large group of sucker fish swam over, and Paposa said excitedly, the sucker fish is here, let's go back to Fishman Island to heal. After a while, the 2 immobile murlocs did not sink to the bottom of the sea and return to the Murloc Island. Instead, they rode the wind and waves on the sea at a very fast speed, passing through wave after wave. Lily lying on the sun lounger, he complained to Sanchin, Sanchin, can we not go to an island with some ghost legends? We are on vacation, so we can't go to an amusement park island, a food island, and a toy island. Island, resort island, cake island or something. Quote. Sanchin listened to Moli's complaint and laughed. I know, then let's go to a place called Mocha Island, which is an island rich in desserts. Limo sat up and looked at Sanchian with a hopeful expression on his face. Really? Then what are we waiting for? Go. Go. Chapter 86. Lean the boat over. Limo's warship is heading towards the desert island, Mocha, and he always has to do something when he is bored. The first thing Limo thought of was fishing, but this time it was Jimmy who taught him the wicked way of fishing. Li Kie sat on the edge of the boat with a cigar in his mouth and a fishing rod in his hand, leisurely waiting for the fish to take the bait. Fishing, fishing, Li Kie hung himself into a dead fish eye. Hey, Jimmy, do you have to use a fishing rod to fish? Moli asked, shaking the fishing rod in his hand. Jimmy, who was sorting out the ingredients, looked up at Moli. Of course, you must use a fishing rod for fishing, otherwise what? Moli raised his eyebrows, threw the fishing rod aside, and said excitedly, Can I teach you? Jimmy looked at Moli suspiciously, Huh? 10 minutes later. Look at the big pile of sea king meat on the deck. Jimmy's face was black, and the sailors were full of admiration. It turns out that fish can be caught like this. Moli raised his arm, patted his biceps, and said loudly, Man fishing. You should use your body as bait. Then, everyone's attention was focused on Limo, and no one noticed that a pirate ship was gradually approaching. Tweet. A pitch-black cannonball roared from a distance and hit Moli, who was taking a fishing lesson. Bang! He directly smashed Limo from one side of the boat to the other side, and then fell into the sea with a thump. This old-fashioned solid shell relies on kinetic energy to attack. Unlike the new gunpowder shells, which explode and cause explosion damage, the old-fashioned shells cannot explode and have limited lethality. The lookout on the mast pulled the alarm directly and shouted loudly. Ah! Enemy attack! Quickly meet! The Navy was in a mess, and under the command of Binkata, began to turn the muzzle and aimed at the pirate ship in the distance. Jimmy said helplessly, Aren't you going to save your chief first? As soon as Jimmy finished his words, with a bang, Li Kie rushed out of the sea and jumped onto the deck. Angrily said, Who the hell fired at me? Major General Moli, it's Drought Jack from the Beast Pirates with a bounty of 1 billion. Binkata shouted. Limo stood beside Binkata, looking at a pirate ship with a long ivory elephant head on the bow in the distance, frowned, pulled the corner of his mouth, took out his saber, and stepped on the edge of the boat with one foot. Pointed to the pirate ship in the distance, and shouted viciously, Put the ship over. Sink it for me. Captain Jack, I hit a warship ahead. On the pirate ship, a minion shouted excitedly. Drought Jack, one of the 3 major kanbans of the Beast Pirates, is fauna, elephant and elephant fruit, ancient species, and mammoth form. Jack walked out of the cabin with a strong body and huge ivory. He stood on the deck and looked at the warship that was approaching him. This kind of large warship can only be used by the admiral-level navy, and asked, Who is on this warship? At this moment, the lookout put away the telescope and howled excitedly, "Captain Jack! It's the Navy that Mr. Kaido is looking for. Huh, boys, pull the boat over, sink it for me." Boom, boom, boom. The two ships got closer and closer, and the counter-bombing shells blasted the sea and smashed the hull. Finally the two ships approached. "Little ones, get ready for a battle. Come on, don't hold back. We have Major General Moly." Moly took the lead in rushing to the pirate ship, and shouted at the same time, "Brothers! Fuck me these bastards." Drought Jack took out two sickle-shaped weapons from behind, looked at Moly who was rushing over, and shouted, "Kill." The two scythes were raised high and slashed down, and Li Qiye raised the sword to rung. When the weapons of the two sides collided, and a huge airflow erupted, blowing away the surrounding pirates. Li Mo looked at the strong man in front of him, and said viciously, "You're just fucking Jack." Jack's eyes widened and he roared furiously, "Navy! Are you Li Mo?" With the sound of roaring, Jack swung his scythe quickly, and Moly blocked them one by one. After blocking a heavy slash, Moly took advantage of the attacking airstrike and grabbed the ivory on Jack's chest. Moly exerted a little force, grabbed the ivory, turned around, and under Moly's tremendous force, Jack rose into the air and smashed into the deck. Li Qiye didn't even look at Jack, and shouted to Binkada, "Captain, pay attention to brothers, don't overturn the car, you will be hacked to death." Binkada was very moved, and Major General Moly was concerned about the safety of the soldiers while fighting, and immediately shouted, "Yes. Major General Moly, I will never disappoint Major General's expectations." Moly was stunned, "Huh." Without giving Moly a chance to speak, a loud and angry elephant roar sounded from the hull. "Ang! Huh." Moly was surprised. "Does this boat still keep elephants?" After an elephant roar, the entire pirate ship began to shake violently. The surrounding pirate minions were shocked, and they retreated and fled, shouting, "Captain Jack has used his ability. Run, it will be affected." Hearing the shouts of the minions, Li Qiye frowned and turned to look at the soldiers who were about to chase and push the pirates. "Leave it to me here. You go back to the warship first. He seems to have some strange ability. Major Li, Drought Jack is the animal mammoth fruit person. Please be careful." After Binkada instructed Li, he shouted to the Navy, "Evacuate. Jump into the sea, Miss Jimmy will catch us." "Yes." "Oh." The navies fell into the sea one after another like dumplings, while Jimmy used his abilities to lift up the Navy by the surging waves. At this time, there was only one person left on the pirate ship. Moly ignored the pirates who were huddled in the stern, but watched the mammoth burst out from the cabin, almost 1/3 the size of the pirate ship. "Hold head high. You are too arrogant, Navy." Jack roared loudly, and the giant whip-like trunk slammed into Li Qiye. "Oh oh oh, Captain Jack's ability, Captain Jack." The pirates' onlookers shouted excitedly. Moly sneered, "You are too arrogant. Pirates." The strong wind generated by the elephant's trunk smashed, and the righteous cloak blew clangingly. When the elephant's trunk was about to hit Moly, Moly suddenly stretched out his right hand. Bang! The trunk of the elephant smashed into Moly's hand. "Success!" Jack shouted excitedly, and he would be very happy if Mr. Kaido knew that he had solved the Navy he most wanted to kill. It didn't work. Li Qiye grabbed Jack's trunk, raised his head, looked at Jack, and smiled casually. "Your ability is very interesting. Does it become a mammoth? This ancient beast should be extinct." Moly's voice fell, his right hand jerked sharply, Jack stumbled and fell towards Moly. Moly let go of his trunk, quickly grabbed Jack's two tusks with both hands, and met Jack's terrified eyes. Moly grinned. "Ha ha ha, let me see your tusks." "Moly's arms are fighting, Ang." Jack screamed in pain, and at the same time the huge elephant body struggled violently, breaking the mast and destroying the cabin, but Li Qiye was like a nail, motionless. "Bring it to you. Collapse, collapse." Both Jack's ivory was broken by Moly. "Hold head high." Jack roared in pain, turned into a humanoid and lay on the deck. Chapter 87. 4 Emperors. I didn't kill it. Captain Jack. Impossible. How could Captain Jack's ivory be broken? The little scoundrels who huddled in the stern to watch the battle shouted in disbelief. Ah, Navy kid, I'm going to kill you. Jack's face was covered in blood, his eyes were scarlet with a roar, and he turned into a mammoth again. Although his ivory was broken, his aura was even more fierce. His forelimbs were raised high, and his sturdy mammoth's palm was wrapped in a strong armed color. Tamoli. The giant elephant. Stampede. As the name suggests, the strength of the mammoth, as well as Jack's own strength and armed domineering, it is not an exaggeration to say that Mount Tai is overwhelming. In the face of such a powerful blow, Li Qiye would not avoid it. A real man, of course, chose to face it. Moli raised his head to look at the pitch-black elephant palm, his originally indifferent eyes suddenly froze, his right leg slightly retreated, his right hand clenched his fist, and he handed it out suddenly. Bang! The fists and palms hit each other like a thunderbolt on the ground. There were 2 people in the center, and the energy was scattered. There were waves and waves around the 2 ships. The pirate ship slammed into the draft. The pirates on the ship screamed and broke through the fence and fell into the sea. A large piece of the deck where the 2 were standing was broken, and sawdust collapsed. Ahahaha, who do you think Lao Su is? Jack laughed wildly. Obviously, he was quite confident in his blow. Suddenly, the sound of his wild laughter stopped abruptly, and Jack's eyes widened in disbelief. He was watching his front legs being lifted little by little, and at the same time, there was that annoying sound in his ears. I said, big stupid elephant, if you offer a reward of 1 billion, is it worth 9 billion for ivory? Impossible. You can't be alive. Jack immediately released his mammoth form, took out his scythe weapon, attached a strong domineering aura of armament, and flew towards Li Qiye. The 2 knives were raised above his head and slashed at Moli. Moli slightly sideways dodged, and the slashes from the 2 sickles cut 2 cracks in the deck of the pirate ship. When Li Qiye turned sideways, his left hand turned into a palm and slashed at Jack's shoulder. Click. Bang. As Jack's bones shattered, his whole body smashed the deck and fell into the hull. Limo pursed his lips and said disdainfully, rough combat skills. The boss doesn't talk about the second child. In fact, he himself is the same. Who is the serious person who fights and doesn't call the name of the move? Moli jumped into the hull as he spoke. At this time, Jack was lying in a pile of sawdust, panting heavily. Ha, ha, Navy. Mr. Kaido will avenge me. He is the Emperor of the Sea, the 4 Emperors. Moli stepped on Jack's neck, leaned down and looked at the bloody face untied, and said with a smile, Yo, I didn't expect you to be average in strength, and your teeth are quite sharp. After laughing, Li Qiye stared at Jack with cold eyes, and said in shock, 4 Emperors. It's not like I haven't killed him before. Okay, you scum, I'll keep you until your 4 Emperors come to rescue you. Moli's voice fell, and his palm turned into a knife, smashing Jack's limbs. Ah, damn Navy. Moli grabbed the horn above Jack's head and jumped onto the deck, then jumped back to the warship, threw the limb-limbed Jack onto the deck, and said, hand on him, I'll wait for his boss to save him. Yes, Major General Moli. Binkata brought several pairs of Halu stone handcuffs and put Jack on his back, and then found the thickest iron chain to tie Jack. The pirates on the pirate ship were frightened by the man on the warship. The beast pirates, Drought Jack, one of the 3 major kanbans under the 4 Emperor Kaido, was defeated by that man in this way. The pirates swallowed their saliva, as if they were waiting for that person's life and death judgment on them, escape. Unrealistic, this pirate ship has been riddled with holes and shattered by the battle between the 2. What are they going to do? 3001 pointed to the pirates on the pirate ship, who were panicked because Jack was caught in the defeat. Limo turned around and looked. Without any hesitation, he said solemnly, Shanghai. Boom, boom, boom. The pirate ship, which was almost damaged by the battle between Moli and Jack, was completely a target. The 5-round salvo of the warship's main guns turned the pirate ship into sawdust and floated on the sea. As for the dead, injured, and the pirate minions struggling in the sea, no one will care about them anymore. Li Qian kicked the half-dead Jack with insults and sneered, "Brother will take you to a big dinner." Jack stared fiercely at Li Mo, and shouted bitterly, "Wait to die. After Mr. Kaido arrives." Bang! Before Jack could finish speaking, he was kicked in the face by Mo Li and flew far away. Li put down his feet and said softly, "He's here, take him to eat, don't worry about it." "Mr. Li, do you want to put Drought Jack in the cell?" Binkata asked. After the battle just now, Binkata's admiration for Li Moli deepened, and the title changed from Major General to Mr. Moli thought for a while and said, "Let's just throw it into the corner on the deck." Yes. Drought Jack was dragged directly to the side of the cabin by the sailors, and no one cared about him. Of course, they were not worried that Jack would run away, because Lily was lying on the deck. "By the way, Captain, take the wounded brothers to the infirmary. They don't need to work for the time being. Let's cultivate first." Binkata was very moved and said loudly, "Thank you very much, Mr. Moli can wait for his subordinates." Moli twitched the corners of his mouth and said with a smile, "Go ahead." Yes. After ordering all this, Li Qian sat down on the reclining chair, touched his stomach, licked his lips, and shouted loudly, "Jimmy, do you have anything to eat? I'm hungry." Moli waited for a while after shouting, when Jimmy's voice came from the cabin, "Come to the restaurant. After the war, of course, you have to eat a good meal to reward yourself. As for what you eat, it doesn't matter, what matters is what you eat." Bang! The super bowl of ramen was placed in front of Moli, and Moli was a little unhappy. "I just finished the war, so you will give me instant noodles." Moli pouted, looked at Jimmy, and pointed at ramen, "That's it." Jimmy was taken aback, and looked down at the ramen. The soup is browned, rich and oily, and minced garlic is added to make the soup taste even better. The pork slices of the barbecued pork are very thickly sliced, the fat has melted into the shredded pork, the seafood fish balls are also quite strong, and the sweet-hearted eggs are also cut into 2 pieces. Jimmy looked at the ramen on the table, lost in thought. "That's all." Oh, Jimmy suddenly realized that, hitting his right fist on his left palm, took out 2 pieces of seaweed from his apron and stuck it by the side of the bowl. "Sure enough, you can't eat ramen without seaweed." Jimmy looked at Moli, who was still unmoved. She pursed her lips, "Right." Suddenly, Jimmy had a flash of inspiration, turned around and entered the back kitchen, and then came out immediately, with an extra bottle of ice Coke in his hand. Seeing the ice cola, Limo nodded with his mouth wide open. "That's right. Eating noodles is not worthy of ice cola, what does it look like?" Just when Moli caught Jack and went to Mocha, there was also a cake-shaped pirate ship heading towards the desert island, Mocha. Chapter 88, You May Not Believe It If You Say It. The next day. After breakfast, Lily carried the reclining chair out of the cabin and glanced at the boatman, lying in the corner. He was surprised to find that the limbs he had just broken yesterday were almost healed today. The bruises have faded. Is the recovery ability of animal fruits so abnormal? Moli murmured as he crouched beside Jack. Humph! Jack snorted coldly, and then said fiercely, "Your end is coming, Mr. Kaido is about to." Before Jack could finish his harsh words, Li Qian threw 2 punches and broke Jack's arms again. Li Mo sneered, "Hey. Again, my legs will be discounted." Damn. Li Mo was in a very good mood today. In a battle yesterday, 2 elephant tusks were seized, and he was able to deduct 2 pairs of mahjong and 4 or 5 pairs of chopsticks. Just when Li Qian was enjoying his leisure time, the phone on his wrist rang. Blue blue, blue blue. Kacha. Hey, it's Old Saw. Moli, the matter of Kawaji Island has been settled. The big snake and the villagers are all safe. For your business, the old man was severely complained by the high-level officials. Moli Jun, how do you repay the old man? What? Molly almost vomited. A wretched old man in his 50s, pouring bitter water on you and wanting to repay, who can bear it? After swallowing his saliva, Lily forced a smile and said, well, old saw, how about I give you an elephant tusk in return? The yellow monkey was obviously stunned for a moment. Ivory. Isn't he on vacation? Where did you get the ivory? The confused Kiwi asked. Huh. Ivory. Molly licked his lips and said proudly, you may not believe it. I got a pair of elephant tusks yesterday. I'll give you one later. You can buckle a tea set and spare a pair of tableware. Really? Then thank you, Kizaru said. He didn't ask where the ivory came from, and most importantly, he couldn't care about that either. The yellow monkey on the phone bug continued. By the way, there may be big moves in the Navy in the near future. Marshal of the Warring States period is about to step down, and the successor has not yet been decided. You have a good vacation recently. Limo nodded and said affirmatively. Don't worry, I will definitely not cause trouble. I am on vacation, what can I cause trouble? By the way, who will take over as the marshal? Kizaru said. Sakazuki and Kuzan, one of the two. Molly asked suspiciously, you're not going. I'm getting old. Molly sneered. If you're lazy, you're too lazy. You're 2 or 3 years older than Zhao Hong. Immediately afterward, Li Qiye said, come on, it's useless to be a marshal anyway. The top management is in charge of him, and the subordinates refuse to accept it. It doesn't mean anything. Huang Yuan chuckled lightly, you think so? Limo immediately retorted, you want to open up more. Okay, then that's it, don't make trouble lately, and we'll talk about it when it's over here. Gotcha. Kazuna gave an order and hung up the phone. Molly pouted, this old saw is really, sailing well, finding a place to relax, what can I do? With his hands behind his head, the whole person was lying on the sun lounger, the clear sky, the blue ocean, and the salty sea breeze. Molly squinted his eyes. You're my little boy, little apple, I can't love you too much. He sang one of the favorite square dance songs of the aunties outside the kendo hall. The 3,000 who came over with a drink in hand, heard Molly singing a strange song, with a speechless expression on his face. Sanchin put the drink on the small table next to Molly and said, we're getting to Mocha soon. Then he pointed to Jack who was tied into a dumpling behind him. What about this guy? Molly squinted at Jack and said, take him, isn't he shaking? I'll wait and see what his boss can do with me. Mocha Island is an island rich in all kinds of desserts. The people here are only interested in fish, and that is how to make better desserts. Because Mocha Island is a territory belonging to the non-joined country Danube, there is no naval garrison on this island. The nearest naval branch on Mocha Island is the G2 branch where Vice Admiral Gumir is located. It was the naval branch base where Ace helped the little girl deliver letters to her parents who worked in the restaurant of the G2 branch when Ace was chasing Blackbeard. In the sea, Li Qiye held up his binoculars and looked at a small island that was getting closer, but the port of the island listened to 2 strange pirate ships in the shape of cream cakes. Pirate ships of this shape were rare. Binkata, who was beside him, put down the telescope in his hand and said nervously, Mr. Molly, that should be the fleet of the 4 emperors, Big Mom pirates. She is keen to eat all kinds of delicious desserts. Especially with a soft spot for cakes, these ships should have come here because of this, dessert island. Quote. It's the 4 emperors again. How can you meet them anywhere? Molly muttered, and handed the binoculars to Binkata. Molly, no matter what kind of 4 emperors you are without an emperor, you can talk about the emperor of the sea when you talk about it. The warship soon approached the port of Mocha Island and docked next to the pirate ships. Limo looked at the pirate flag, and pointed at the 3 cake boats. Hey, Captain, bomb me. Binkata was taken aback. He just caught Drought Jack from the Beast's pirates. Will this blow up the fleet of the Big Mom pirates? He exclaimed, Mr. Lee, now. Didn't General Huang Yuan call you just now and tell you not to cause trouble? Limo glanced at Binkata displeased. You mean to repair the boat for them first, and wait for 10 days and a half months before bombing? Ah, no, execute now. Binkata gave a military salute, turned around and shouted, all artillerymen are in place, 3 pirate ships in the target port, 2 salvos from the main naval guns. 3 salvos from the rest of the naval guns. Prepare. Soon, all the naval guns were loaded, and Binkata looked at Molly. Limo stood on the deck and shouted, let it go. Boom, boom, boom. After all 3 rounds of naval guns were fired, 2 of the 3 ships had been blown up. Limo nodded. 1 more round. Let it go. Boom, boom, boom. This time, the shell did not hit the surviving cake ship, but was intercepted by a pink slash in the air. Huh. Molly looked at the cannonball that was intercepted and exploded by the slash, and glanced at the cake boat. I saw a very tall woman wearing a hat and a scarf, showing one eye, white hair and long legs with tattoos, holding a long sword, standing at the stern of the cake boat. Navy, you annoy me. The woman is officially the 14th daughter of the Charlotte family, the minister of juice, the one who squeezes the fruit, Charlotte Smoothie, with a bounty of 932 million Bailey. Molly stood on the bow of the warship, looked at Smooch, and nodded involuntarily. Nice legs. Chapter 89. Let your mother lead people. Major General Molly, she is Charlotte Smoothie of the Big Mom Pirates, with a bounty of 932 million Baileys. According to the data, he is a superhuman fruit-squeezing ability who can. Before Binkata could finish speaking, Smoothie pointed at Molly with his long sword and shouted, damn Navy. I'm going to squeeze you dry. Molly was stunned for a moment, turned his head and followed Binkata's words, can you squeeze it dry? Binkata swallowed her saliva and said, she is dehydrated and can squeeze water out of objects she touches to produce juice. Limo nodded and looked at Binkata approvingly. I didn't expect you to be an encyclopedia. As soon as Molly finished speaking, he felt a gust of wind passing by, messing up his hair, and turned his head to look. I saw 3,000 hands covered with thick-armed domineering, plundering in the air, and rushing straight towards Smoothie. You bitch who wants to squeeze men out. Die to me. Fuck, who is going to stop her? Molly shouted in horror. This unlucky girl just rushed over, what if the car overturned? But I saw that Smoothie struck 3,000 in midair with a slash. Penetrate. 3,000 passed through Smoothie's slash, and when she came to her, a heavy fist slammed on Smoothie's sword. 6 consecutive nail punches. Boom. 3,000 nails can overturn the fire dragon with 4 consecutive nails. These 6 nailed punches slammed on Smoothie's sword and directly penetrated the entire cake boat. 3,000 even took Smoothie through the ship. Arrived at the port. Damn it, 3,000 is really fierce. Quick, get the boat over there. Molly was taken aback by such a fierce attack of 3,000. Silly girl, she has long legs of more than 900 million. And those long legs are taller than yours, so what are you trying to do? Jimmy held Kumik, watched Sanchin's crazy actions, pouted, and said, the woman in your secret love is really scary. Limo glanced at Jimmy and said nothing. Boom, boom. As soon as the warship arrived at the port, there was a sound of banging in the smoke caused by the fight between the two. Little dwarf, go to hell. Bitch, go to hell. Bang. The two hit each other, and then quickly backed away. 3,000, why don't I come? Molly quickly supported the 3,000 who were sliding on the ground with both feet. No, even though this bitch is strong, I won't admit defeat. Sanchin wiped away the blood spilling from the corner of his mouth, which was bruised by the shock. At this time, Sanchin stared at Smoji who was standing opposite him with a sword. Although she was very unconvinced, she also knew that she was not the opponent of this woman, but she could not always stand by Molly. Behind. Lord Smoothie. Lord Smoothie, are you all right? Smoothie stared at Sanchin, and then looked at Molly behind Sanchin. In an instant, Smoothie's pupils shrank. My heart was dark. This guy is the Navy who killed Whitebeard. How could he appear here? He's eyeing us. It should be, or it won't. He attacked us as soon as we landed. Thinking of Smoothie here, he stabbed the long sword into the little guy's body, and the little guy was squeezed dry by Smoothie in an instant, and at the same time, Smoothie's body visibly grew bigger. Ah, Lord Smoothie, spare your life. How could Smoothie care about the struggle of the little minion, and his eyes refocused on the direction of Sanchin and Lee. Damn it, you damn Navy, how dare you provoke us? After gaining strength, Smoothie took 2 steps forward, and the giant sword slashed. I'm coming. 3000.5 knelt on the ground, clenching his fists. The armed color became more domineering. Whoosh. 3000 rushed towards Smoothie at an extremely fast speed, and between the lightning and flint, his fists collided with Smoothie's long sword. 9 consecutive nails, jabs. This is Sanchin's strongest blow at the moment. She doesn't want to be a burden to Lee Mo, and she doesn't want to be the one who needs protection. She also wants to participate in the war on the top, and stand by Lee Mo's side. Boom. The annular air wave exploded and excited, causing a strong wind in an instant. Bang. After the two were deadlocked for a few seconds, Smoothie staggered back a few steps, and 3000 vomited blood and fell from the air. Molly quickly jumped into the air to catch 3000. Cough cough. I'm sorry, I couldn't defeat her. Sanchin, whose lips were red with blood, fell into Molly's arms, his eyes filled with guilt. Lee Mo shook his head with a smile, stretched out his hand and stroked the long hair scattered around Sanchin's temples, and said softly, "No, you have made great progress. I think next time there is a war, Sanchin, you will definitely be mine." Back. Hearing what Molly said, Sanchin's originally dull eyes radiated a little brilliance. Really? Of course. Molly carefully handed 3000 to Jimmy, glanced at the ruined port. Molly frowned, then stretched out again, and said to 3000, "When I clean up her, I will take you to eat delicious food." After finishing speaking, Molly straightened the saber on his waist and turned towards Smoothie. He looked at the tall Smoothie, whose long legs were already taller than his stature, and smacked his mouth and said, "Juicer. Do you want to squeeze more juice, or you won't have a chance?" Smoothie stared at the man who was full of flaws in front of her, but such a lazy man gave her an indescribable amount of pressure. Scoff. Lord Smoothie. Scoff. Sir, forgive me. Smoothie grew taller and taller, and at this time her body was even bigger than the cake boat lying next to her. Ah, ah, ah. Smoothie raised his great sword, and water droplets fell on the edge of the sword, followed by a domineering dark-armed color and a dense pink mist. Ha! Smoothie's huge long sword slashed down, and a huge slash loomed. Gorgeous, Molly drew his knife and struck, instantly appearing under the long sword that Smooch had slashed, and the snow-white blade slashed upwards and horizontally with the sword gang attached to it. When the sound of huge swords colliding resounded throughout the island, and the strong pressure air between the swords caused a burst of wind, and the cake boat on the side blew and sank into the sea. Collapse. Smoothie's hands holding the great sword could no longer withstand such a huge shock, and was knocked out of his hands. Ah! Smoothie's eyes widened, looking at the man in the air in disbelief, shouting in horror. After Molly won with one blow, the offensive continued unabated, and the tip of the knife on the front of the knife was pointed directly at Smooch. Prick! A snow-white cone slash pierced Smoothie's shoulder. Ah! Damn it, you bloody Navy! Smoothie fell to the ground, clutching his shoulders and yelling in pain. Bah! Molly landed, walked slowly to Smoji, and said disdainfully, "If scolding could win, I would be dead long ago. Captain, handcuff her up and put her with our boatman." After shouting to Binkata, he turned around and said to Smoji, "Isn't your mother some 4 emperors? You call her here and come to me to lead someone. Just as there is another 4 emperors coming, let's get together and fight a landlord." Chapter 90, The Legendary Iron Lady. Li Kie sat on the gravel in the port, watching the doctor bandage Sanchin's wrist. "How is it?" Li Mo asked the doctor. The doctor nodded and replied, It's okay, the wrist is contused, and the bones are a little displaced. It has been dealt with. Miss Sanchin's internal organs have been damaged by shocks, but don't worry, there is no internal organs rupture, and it will be fine to rest for a while. With a sigh, Li Qian looked at San Qian, who was also embarrassed to look at Mo Li. Hee hee. Sanchin smirked at Mo Li's eyes with crescent moon crescents. Mo Li's old face wrinkled, and he deliberately faced Sanchin with a stern face. Hee hee. Sanchin was stunned by Mo Li, blinked innocently, and looked at Mo Li. Mo Li's tensed face collapsed, and he shook his head. This silly girl, really. Hey Tilda. Report to Major General Mo Li, the civilians have been appeased, and you can land on the island at any time. Venkata, who went to appease the civilians, walked quickly to Mo Li and gave a salute. Well, tie those two people up with sea tower stones, then throw them at the port and let their subordinates report the letter. After speaking, Mo Li quickly glanced around the half-destroyed port and said, when we leave some money for the mayor. After all, we broke the port. Yes. Let's go and see the power of Desert Island. Entering the central street from the port, Li Qian walked at the forefront, biting his cigar, the cloak of justice swayed as he walked. The 3,000 behind him followed Mo Li with a smile, and changed out of the dirty formal clothes. The new one was the one that Jimmy bought for her on Kawaji Island. Jimmy led Kumik to the left and looked curiously. The shops on both sides of the street were buying puddings, cakes and other desserts. The buildings on the island are very cute, and the shapes of the factories are all enlarged versions of puffs, puddings, and tiramisu. The battle that took place in the port just now was witnessed by many people. Although Binkata tried to appease others, the people on the island were still afraid when they watched the navy led by Mo Li. On a small island like Mocha, because the country is not a member of the world government, there is no navy stationed there. They are still somewhat unfamiliar with the navy. The only navy they have ever seen is the soldiers who occasionally come to buy desserts in the G2 fortress. Among the civilians, there are still many people in different costumes who are looking at Mo Li and his party. They have all seen the battle in the port, and they also know who Mo Li is, otherwise they will not easily defeat the three of, and will star in a dessert-themed restaurant. Major General Mo Li. Binkata stepped up to Mo Li's side, holding a stack of wanted orders in his hand, and whispered, there seems to be a lot of pirates on this island. The Aiken pirates with a bounty of 70 million. The 110 million feet fire disaster, Duobu pirates. And some are gangs from nearby islands. Although we haven't found any felons on the 6th floor of the city, but we don't have enough manpower to arrest these people. Huh. Mo Li breathed out a mouthful of smoke and said to Binkata, you should contact the nearest branch fortress. First, ask them to send troops to support them. The most important thing is to arrange for the evacuation of civilians. Second, catch the trash lurking on this island. Quote. Major General Mo Li, the nearest naval base to Mocha Island is Lieutenant General Gumir's G2 branch, said Binkata. Li Mo nodded. Then G2. Yes. Binkata gave a military salute and left. Coincidence meets coincidence, and Mo Li is also helpless. Who would have thought that he was just like catching a fish, pretending to be a coward in front of his subordinates, and then a naval battle broke out. He also captured the big stupid elephant Jack, but it was not a loss, and he even captured it. 2 ivory, but this 900 million long legs, Mo Li is a little bit painful. Thinking about it now, it's like fighting at the school gate when you go to school. The losing side must speak harshly. You wait, I will ask my big brother to fuck you, or the most despised, you wait, I will give you my dad made a phone call. Then what do you think about this thing? For Mo Li, if you call your father, I will beat your father. Mo Li, this tiramisu with cappuccino is surprisingly delicious. Sanchin held a small spoon and dug out the tiramisu piece by piece. The wrist injury did not affect her eating rhythm at all. Mo Li looked at San Qian's way of eating, and pouted his lips disdainfully. Sister, this is not how you eat it. Sanchin and Jimmy were taken aback by what Mo Li said. How do they eat? Molly sighed. Look at it. After saying that, he gently picked up a rectangular piece of tiramisu, and with a gentle touch, the tiramisu was stunned and not a single piece of slag fell. Oh tilde tilde tilde. Seeing Molly's move, Jimmy was shocked. It was amazing. Ah woo tilde tilde woo woo woo, suck. Ha tilde tilde. Limo put the whole tiramisu in his mouth, chewed it a few times quickly, then picked up the cappuccino and drank it. The whole process was smooth, without the slightest extra movement, stunned Sanchin and Jimmy, stunned the waiter in the restaurant, and stunned the pastry chef behind the glass window. On the Ghost Island. Boss Kaido, the ship is ready and ready to sail. A minion shouted to Kaido, who was drinking heavily. Flame Calamity, Jin, who was holding his shoulders beside him, said, Kaido, do you need me to go? Ha! Kaido took a sip and said, Jin, you stay to guard the country of Wano, and Quinn also stays to continue to develop the virus. As for the fool Jack. Bang! Kaido smashed the wine gourd and said angrily, I'll go in person. Navy brat, you did a good job and even killed that strange old man, you should kill me too. At this moment, the phone worm rang. Blue blue, blue blue. Mr. Kaido, it's a big mom. Ah, Ling Ling. Kaido gritted his teeth angrily. Gotcha. Long time no see, Kaido. The aunt's sinister voice sounded. Ling Ling, let's avoid talking about old times. Well, Kaido, the Navy Lily destroyed my cake boat, and the one who caught Smoothie also caught your trash. After Auntie finished speaking, her tone suddenly became gloomy. Full of chills. Kaido, don't interfere, I'll take care of that Navy myself. Stop joking. The gluttonous old woman. Are you ordering Lao Su? Kaido yelled angrily while holding the 8 fasts. After a burst of laughter, the aunt was also furious. Kaido. See you at Mocha, kill you first, kill that Navy. Gotcha. Kaido's eyes widened, and after a while, he shouted, sail. Damn old woman, damn Navy. Molly, who was full, bit his cigar and asked, Captain, you said that the long-legged juicer was the 14th daughter of the Big Mom. What did you mean? Binkata nodded and explained, Big Mom is a woman who only believes in blood. Most of her crew members are her children. There are 85 children in total. The rest. Cough cough. Wait. Molly choked on his cigarette, sighed and said in shock, 85 children. How old is the Big Mom? According to the data, Big Mom Charlotte Lingling should be 68 years old. Molly was still shocked and said in disbelief, one child with 5 treasures. What a legendary Iron Lady. Chapter 91, The Emergency Military Situation of the Good Man. As night fell, the afterglow of the setting sun had disappeared on the sea level, but the moon in the sky was very bright. This was also a very strange thing for Molly. At the last thought, there should be less smog, probably so. Half of the harbor was destroyed, and the waves crashed against the collapsed rubble of the harbor. Both Jack and Smoothie were locked in Halu stone handcuffs, and the big iron chains behind their hands were strong. Jack glanced at the 2 Navy guards who were standing not far away, and sneered, what an arrogant Navy, do you just want to watch Lao Su by sending 2 Navy soldiers? On the side, Smoothie glanced at the nagging Jack, and then closed his eyes again, wondering what he was thinking. Jack turned to Smoothie and said, Hey, Smoothie, do you want to run away? Smoothie opened his eyes when he heard the words, looked at Jack lying on the ground, and said blankly, I don't want to. Jack was stunned. In his impression, shouldn't this woman be a proud person? Why don't you want to run away now? Smoggy, are you scared of being beaten by him? Just a Navy kid. Smoothie was speechless looking at Jack lying limply on the ground. Are Kaido's men all fools? If you stood there intact, I might have believed your nonsense. But in order to prevent this idiot from creating confusion and causing unnecessary trouble, Smoothie could only explain a few words patiently. Idiot, I don't know how you climbed to the position of the 3 major boards of the Beast Pirates, but I advise you to be honest, the white-haired woman in the town has been monitoring us. Jack was stunned for a while, then said in disbelief, "Seeing sex? Impossible, how could a woman seeing and feeling cover this place?" Smoothie closed her eyes and ignored this idiot. That woman was a new hero in the Navy and Lee's adjutant. Although her combat power was not high, her knowledge was not low. When she was fighting during the day, she noticed it. Jack gave Smoothie a sidelong glance, then stopped talking. In the hotel, Molly gently wiped his saber with a cloth. Sanchin sat on the sofa and rubbed his wrist, mostly hoping that his wrist would recover soon. After all, there were still 4 emperors in the port. It is impossible for the cadres, Ant and Kaido, to not send someone to rescue, or they come in person. Jimmy leaned against the windowsill with his shoulders in his arms, and looked at Sanchian without saying a word. She was shocked by the fighting power of Sanchian during the day. Although he was able to beat the 3-star smudge, he was defeated in the end. But the strength of 3,000 is also extraordinary. Molly put the knife in the sheath, lit a cigar, nestled on the back of the sofa, and smoked a cigarette comfortably. "Molly, aren't you worried?" Jimmy asked suddenly. Molly looked at Jimmy, thinking what happened to Jimmy's eldest sister. So he asked strangely, "What are you worried about?" Jimmy sighed and said, "The 4 emperors are monsters on the sea, not to mention that they have any strange abilities. Just say that their forces are not something we can deal with by one boat." Hearing Jimmy say this, Sanchin also looked at Molly with some worry. Although Molly killed Whitebeard, who is also the 4th emperor, but now he may have to face 2 pirates at the level of the 4th emperor, they cannot be tolerated. "Don't worry anymore." Molly thought for a while and said softly, "I'm not worried about the 4 emperors, I just care a little bit." Sanchin hurriedly asked, "What do you care about? If it is not easy to solve, we will contact Lao Sa immediately." Molly waved his hand and said doubtfully, "You said, Big Mom has given birth to so many children, so how many men does she have?" As soon as these words came out, Sanchin and Jimmy looked at each other blankly. Jimmy turned his head and looked out the window, ignoring Molly. Sanchin simply curled up with his legs on the sofa and turned his back to Li Qian. "Hey, what's the matter? Let's talk, aren't you curious?" Molly was a little embarrassed when he watched both of them take care of him. At this time, Kumik tugged at Molly. "Huh." Li Qian looked at Kumik with a fierce look while smoking a cigarette. The puppet Kumik can't understand human emotions at all, and tilted his head. "Momo. Kumi tilde tilde. What do you want to say?" Limo frowned, looking at Kumik, who was holding his clothes in one hand and 5-color ice cream in the other. Kumik blinked. "Kumi tilde tilde tilde. Ah, you're talking, don't pull my pants." Molly pulled Kumik's pants. Kumik staggered forward. Clap. The 5-color ice cream was not wasted at all, it was all fed to Limo's pants. Navy Headquarters. Although he has resigned, the issue of the new marshal has not been decided yet. Aokiji recommended by the Warring States period is not favored by the senior officials of the world government. The senior officials of the world government and even the 5 old stars are more supportive of Akainu. The concept is more suitable for this era of great pirates. The office of the Warring States period was brightly lit, and Aokiji sat on the sofa and dozed off bored. After the Warring States handed the last document to the lamb to eat, he rubbed his brows and sighed. "Kuzan, the higher-ups of the world government are more supportive of Sakazuki." Aokiji glanced at the Warring States and said bluntly, "Even if this is the case, I will not agree. Sakazuki's ideas are too radical." Sengoku did not make a judgment on the justice that Akainu upholds, but mentioned another matter. "The competition between you and Sakazuki, our older generation can't help you." Kizaru's attitude is to remain neutral. Karp was dismissed and relegated to the second line, but having a personal attitude is crucial. Kuzan paused and said, "Is it Lee?" Warring States nodded, raised his arms to look at Qingzi, and said seriously, "The great combat power displayed by Li Qian and his strong performance in the war have been mentioned many times by the 5 old stars. Let Mo Li enter the world government directly. God's army, but they were both suppressed by me and Kong." Although Mo Li didn't enter the army of God, Wu Laoxing still cares about him very much. As you know about the Kawaji Island incident, Huang Yuan went to see Wu Laoxing and only got a few reprimands. At this time, Mo Li's team is particularly important. Aokiji, who doesn't care about anything, rarely shows seriousness and prudence on his face this time. I know, but Sakazuki also knows that after the war, we all went to the hospital to see Lee Moli. Aokiji paused, then said, and he's directly under Pulsolino. Warring States was still saying something, just listen to the shouting outside the door. Report. Emergency military situation of the G2 branch. Come in. A Navy soldier pushed in the door with a folder, saluted Sengoku and Aokiji, and put the folder on Sengoku's desk. Gumir, this good man, what emergency military situation does he have? Warring States shook his head and said easily. All naval branches are counted, the worst is definitely G5, the most unruly is G3, and the happiest is definitely the G2 branch guarded by Vice Admiral Gumir, because the coffee in the cafeteria was too much. Suffering, Lieutenant General Gumir deliberately convened a meeting of generals above the lieutenant colonel to discuss. Warring States opened the folder and glanced casually. There were only a few lines of words, but it would take Warring States to heal in the rest of his life. The green pheasant looked at the Warring States strangely. Why was the Marshal of the Warring States staring at the document in a daze? What does the document say? That night, the entire Marin Fando heard the roar of the Warring States Marshal. Pulsolino. Chapter 92, The Battle Plan of the Naval Headquarters. Since you're not worried, we won't say anything. Those two people are already tied up there anyway. Jimmy shrugged, pushed the door open, and left. As soon as Jimmy pushed the door open and stretched out one leg, he turned to look at Mo Li, who was sitting on the sofa. She narrowed her eyes slightly and said softly, would you like to go to my room and sit? There's a late-night snack. Huh. Mo Li looked at Jimmy, who was winking like silk. He was about to ask what supper, but before he could ask, he saw San Chianteng jump behind Jimmy. Go, I'll go to your room for supper. 3000 shoved Jimmy, and ran away. Mo Li raised his eyebrows, turned his head to look at Kumik, and grinned, shouting, look at my pants. Before Li Kie could finish speaking, with a bang, the door kicked open, 3000 went back and forth, swept to Kumik's side, grabbed Kumik and ran away. Hey, I said, the dog is not closed. After shouting in a mess for 7 or 8 years, he found that no one cared about his own Li, pouted, got up and closed the door by himself. Mo Li leaned on the windowsill and looked at the night sky. Maybe this moment was the only quiet moment. Mo Li enjoyed this environment very much. At this moment, Kaido and Auntie's ship were already heading for Mocha Island. G2 branch also began to carry weapons to the warship, and prepared many troop carriers to transfer the civilians of Mocha Island. The Navy headquarters is also actively discussing this incident. The surveillance ship monitoring the Big Mom pirates has been unable to contact them, which means that the Big Mom pirates have been dispatched. Lieutenant General Gumir, whether or not Kaido and Big Mom go to Mocha Island in person, you must go to the defense first. In the conference room, the Warring States Marshal said in a deep voice to a phone bug. Understood. I set out overnight. Kacha. Sengoku, who put down the phone bug, looked around the people in the conference room. The 3 major generals of the Navy headquarters, Lieutenant General Crane, as well as flying squirrels and ghost spiders who have not yet assigned missions, more than 10 major generals. Sengoku took a deep breath and said to the crowd, it's certain that Big Mom went to Mocha Island in person, and Kaido's fleet should also be dispatched, but we didn't monitor Kaido, so we're not very sure. Lieutenant General He took over the words and said, I just fought against Whitebeard, and now I am fighting against 2 4 emperors. Even if Mo Li and the Great General are fighting against the 4 emperors, other high-end combat powers will be difficult to compete with the 2 at one time. 4 emperors. The Warring States period is very headache. This Mo Li really can't stop for a moment, he will resign immediately, and he has to cause trouble. Warring States rubbed his brows and said, call the Chihuahai again. Lieutenant General Crane shook his head. These cunning guys, they won't come, they will even help Big Mom and Kaido. If they really fight the two big pirates, they will lose their balance, no matter if the Navy wins or not. Lost, they are all worthless. Quote, you don't have to be so troublesome. Since there is such an opportunity, we will destroy them in one fell swoop. Akainu pressed the brim of his hat and said, no, if the war continues, the Navy can't afford it at all. At this time, Kuzan raised the opposite opinion to Akainu. All eyes were on the two of them. Akainu's fist glowed red. He looked at Aokiji, and said solemnly, Kuzan, you are too weak. It's not weakness, it's a necessary rest, Sakazuki. Aokiji said. The coldness in his mouth was like smoke. Bang! The Warring States Marshal slammed the table and looked at Akainu and Aokiji with gloomy eyes. Sakazuki, Kuzan, it's a war meeting now. Humph! Akainu snorted coldly, hugging his shoulders and saying no more. Chingzi also lowered his head silently, and the lieutenant generals in the conference room wiped their sweat secretly, knowing that these two were fighting for the position of marshals, and the sudden burst of momentum was really terrifying. In the conference room at this time, the needle was falling silently. General Suru, who turned a blind eye to the tit-for-tat between the two, took the chart handed over by the female soldier behind him and slowly spread it out on the table. Lieutenant General Crane's actions attracted everyone's attention, and the Warring States period also quietly waited for Lieutenant General Crane's arrangement. Admiral Crane was silent for a moment, pointed to the two islands on the chart, and said, these two islands. One is called Yinkudong Island and the other is called Long Rabbit Island. In the worst-case scenario, Big Mom and Kaido are at the same time. In the case of dispatch, they came out from Fishman Island and went to Mocha Island. These two islands are also the must-pass through. The straight-line distance between the three islands takes 8 hours to travel with the fastest warship. After Lieutenant General Crane finished speaking, he looked at Aokiji and Akainu. You two will be stationed on Yinkudong Island and Chengtu Island with your own people. No matter who you block, the other party will support them as soon as possible. If the two sides go to war at the same time, Mocha Island's combat power will support it separately. At this time, Kizaru, who had not spoken since entering the conference room, said, after all, it is the pirate regiment of the Four Emperors, isn't the force too weak? Akainu is also looking at Lieutenant General Crane, waiting for further arrangements. Although Akainu is arrogant, he is not an idiot. He admits that he is not afraid of either Big Mom or Kaido, but the strength of the headquarters is not enough to eliminate them. Lieutenant General Crane glanced at Kizaru and said, it's up to you, Pulsalino, your mobility is high, you first go to Mocha Island to meet Moli, and then call out all the pacifists. On two blocking islands, enough for 8 hours. Quote. Then Lieutenant General Crane said heavily, this war is different from Whitebeard. The mission this time is not to destroy them, but to stop them. Then he added, remember, this time is not a desperate war, the purpose is to not allow Big Mom and Kaido to meet, let alone form an alliance against us. Quote. Yes. After a while, everyone dispersed. In the conference room, Warring States was sitting in the same position. General Crane stood at the door with his arms crossed, and the old god of the yellow monkey was smoking a cigarette. After a moment of silence between the three, Sengoku asked Kizaru, Pulsalino, it's up to you to help. Yotilda Warring States sang, don't worry, I will handle my tasks. Kizaru said. What happened to Drake? Lieutenant General Crane asked. I don't know yet, but Kaido's weapons factory seems to have something to do with Doflamingo. After Kizaru finished speaking, he stopped talking. This is a huge underground dark web, involving many people and countries. Hey, I'll leave it to the next marshal, Sengoku said with a sigh. Lieutenant General Crane walked out of the conference room after hearing the words, followed by Kizaru. Only the Warring States was left in the conference room of New Oda. Not to mention the battle arrangement of the Navy headquarters for the time being, Moli caught the matter of the 3 desert generals, Smoji and the 3 disasters Jack. After a long time of fermentation, all the big pirate forces have already known. When Doflamingo heard the news, Doflamingo's unbridled laughter could be heard in every corner of Dressrosa's palace. On an unknown island on the Great Route, Blackbeard held a phone bug and roared excitedly, "Little ones! Our chance is here. That damn Navy is seeking his own death. This is our chance. Seize it. Opportunity for a rare devil fruit." Quote. Ha 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 ha. Limo stood on the edge of the windowsill. From here, he could clearly see Smoothie and Jack lying on the harbor, and looking at this beautiful island. He felt a little regretful and blamed himself for such a beautiful little island. The island will probably be reduced to a battlefield in a few days. Chapter 93. I Miss You. In the early morning of the next day, Molly was sitting in the port, leaning on his chin with one hand and watching the G2 Navy carry weapons and ammunition from the ship one after another. Molly smacked his lips, looked at the two prisoners lying on the ground, and said with some embarrassment, "Hey, tell me, isn't this a big deal?" Jack glared at Molly angrily and said threateningly, "Navy, wait for Mr. Kaido to come, smash your bones inch by inch." Huh. Molly frowned, walked to Jack and squatted down, pointed to Smoothie who didn't speak, and then stretched out his hand to grab Jack's shoulder. "You learn from others, this quiet one, you a big man, why is your mouth so broken?" Kaka. Ah. The pain of the broken bone once again made Jack roar in pain. Smoothie twitched the corners of his mouth, thinking that this Navy is definitely sick, maybe even worse than his mother. Jack couldn't bear it any longer, struggling violently, the iron chains on his body rubbed against the gravel, Hilushi's handcuffs rattled, glared at Molly, and roared loudly, "You goddamn Navy! You will definitely be crushed. Killed. Kill you in the most brutal way." The grief and roar and anger instantly attracted everyone in the port. "Lee Kie has a bad temper. It's boring to see you lying here, so I came to chat with you to relieve the boredom. It's better to be like you, big stupid." He scolded Lao Su again and again, and he couldn't help but get angry and roared, "You bastard. Stuff, you deceive people too much." The voice landed, and Smoji on the side and Gumir, who was directing the civilians to board the ship, looked at him speechlessly. "Too deceitful," can only be said with the thick skin of Molly's current state. "It's obvious that you have been bullying Jack all the time, no more than 3 lines of dialogue, and then broken hands and feet." When Jack heard Molly say that he was too deceiving, he gritted his teeth and glared at Molly. His eyes were so fierce, as if he wanted to kill him immediately. "Huh, how the hell do you dare to stare at me?" Seeing Jack staring at him, Molly couldn't bear it any longer and raised his foot. "Fuck you." In everyone's astonished eyes, Jack flew to the sky and turned into a little star. Gumir hurried over, pointing to the horizon and hesitating, "Molly, this. Limo waved his hands indifferently, and said indifferently, "It's okay, if he survives, he will be a fortune teller." No. Lieutenant General Gumir shook his head quickly and said, "The war is imminent, so it's really good to just kick the hostages away like this." Molly frowned and stared at the Mediterranean Lieutenant General. His eyes changed, and after a while, he turned and walked towards the sea. Gumir stared blankly at Molly's strange behavior and asked aloud, "Molly, what are you doing?" "Of course I'm going to get the big stupid elephant back." The voice fell, and Molly stepped on the surface of the sea and ran quickly in the direction where Jack was kicked. Gumir's surprised eyes protruded. "Can Limo run on the sea? What a strange ability this is." "Hi, Mr. Lieutenant General, do you need a cup of coffee?" Jimmy came up with a tray with a cup of coffee on it. Thank you." Gumir picked up the coffee and looked at Molly, who had run far away and turned into a small black spot. Seeing that Gumir was in a daze and didn't drink coffee, Jimmy thought he was holding the coffee out of courtesy, so he said, "Put sugar and milk." Gumir quickly took a sip of coffee, nodded and praised, "Very good coffee." Jimmy smiled and said, "Thank you," and turned to leave. Gumir immediately asked, "Excuse me, Miss Jimmy, is Lee Kie always like this?" "What?" Jimmy looked at Gumir suspiciously. I mean, Molly always does things, always. Gunir was a little confused. It's not very good to say that people's officials are indifferent, but he couldn't find other adjectives for a while. Jimmy smiled and saw the embarrassment of the lieutenant general, so he continued his words and said with a smile, not in tune. Ha ha. Gunir smiled awkwardly. I'm sorry, I haven't met Lim long, so I don't know his style of work, but I can't figure out his next plan. Jimmy nodded, showing his understanding, and said, Mr. Lieutenant General, you don't have to think about him, you just need to do things at your own pace. He won't cooperate with your deployment anyway, and we don't know what Lieutenant will do next. What will be done, because we have no plan, like the arrest of 2 of the 4 Emperor's subordinates, it is all a coincidence. Ah, ha ha. Gunir was embarrassed and speechless when he heard Jimmy say this, so he could only smile politely. Well, it turns out that all the weird ones are weird. On a small island not far from Mocha Island, the Blackbeards were sitting around a bonfire eating and drinking. Tiki, what do you want to do? Shiliu bit his cigar and stared coldly at Blackbeard. Shiliu's voice fell, and everyone's eyes focused on Blackbeard, who was eating cherry pie, especially the few felons who came out of the 6th floor of the advanced city. They have various purposes and use each other with Blackbeard. Ha 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 ha. Blackbeard laughed for a while, glanced at Shiliu of the Rain, and sneered, don't worry, that old woman from Big Mom and that lunatic Kaido will definitely turn the Navy upside down. They're not like Whitebeard, they're all monsters in their prime. Also, their subordinates have a lot of powerful devil fruit abilities. When they fight both, isn't it our chance? And the Navy that ruined our plan, how could it possibly survive the attack of 2 monsters? Titch, I'll believe you for the last time, don't let us down. Pizarro said with his eyes fixed on Blackbeard. Go 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 go. Basque Chote, a drunken drinker, took a few sips of wine, stuck out his tongue and laughed. Ha ha ha, Captain Titch is really miserable. Have you been laughed at? Ha 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 ha. Blackbeard laughed indifferently, he only had ambition and power in his heart. As long as he got power, these guys would surrender. Huh, what is that? Lafayette, who was flying in the air with his wings, said, pointing to a growing black dot flying in the distance. What? The Blackbeards all looked up at the little black dot. I saw that little black spot getting bigger and bigger. It's a man. It looks like Kaido's subordinate, Drought Jack. Van Orca, holding the gun, saw the whole picture of the little black spot through the sniper scope. Ah, Drought Jack. Didn't he get caught by Molly? Why did he fly over? Daipeng said with a playful expression on his spear. Bang! Jack straight into the bonfire, suddenly on the beach splash. Ah, ah. Damn, Jack is lie in the burning sparks and tumble. Go and see. Blackbeard looked at Jack, his eyes suddenly became much more solemn. How could he fly here? Everyone was looking at Jack, and Bashis shook his shoulders just as he was about to step forward, when he heard a lazy voice that was unforgettable and terrifying for all of them. Yo, isn't this the Tenacious Life Squad? Why are you here? Tiki, you know what? I missed you after so long. Chapter 94, Molly vs Blackbeard Pirates. Molly walked from the sea to the beach step by step. The cloak of justice swayed and fluttered with Molly's footsteps. His left hand was holding the hilt at his waist, the corners of his mouth twitched under his lazy face, and he laughed playfully. Tiki, where have we never met in life? Don't you think there is some kind of fate between us when you and I meet again today? It's you, Molly. Blackbeard's group, all of them looked at Molly vigilantly. The last time they fought was a nightmare for them. The unmatched swordsmanship, the physical skills that crushed everyone, and the few people who were injured by Molly. Every time I think of the wound, I feel a dull pain. Shiu had already held the handle of the knife the moment Molly appeared, looked at Molly solemnly, and asked Blackbeard in a low voice, Tiki, what should I do? Ha ha ha, Molly, are you here specifically to catch me? Blackbeard didn't respond to Shiliu, but laughed loudly, his hands already covered with black mist, staring at Molly. Molly didn't speak. He quietly looked at Blackbeard's group. His eyes turned to the wolf, the guy with a height of nearly 200 meters seemed to be able to lead them to escape, and then he looked at Lafayette, who was flapping his wings and flying in the air. Guy can fly. After a while, deal with the giant first, and then deal with the Birdman, and the others will not be able to escape. Molly, who decided to kill Blackbeard's group in sequence, lit a cigar and smiled at them. No, why am I here to arrest you? Although Molly was smiling, in the eyes of the Blackbeards at this time, he was a time bomb that would explode anytime, anywhere. Oh, is it that? Before Hybrid could finish speaking, he heard Molly say, I didn't come in the boat, and if I caught it, I wouldn't be able to take it with me. Then Molly put the cigar he had smoked on the ground and raised his head to look at Hey bearded group, so I choose to kill you all. Molly's voice fell to the ground, and the atmosphere on the spot instantly froze. Of course, Blackbeard knew that it was impossible to be kind today. I saw Blackbeard Ticky's hands and body like water, and black mist emerged from his body, covering the entire beach. Dark cave. Titch's sudden shot was like a signal to start a war. The sniper Fanoka quickly retreated, and jumped into the forest a few times, hiding his figure, sniping unexpectedly, and bullets as fast as sound wrapped in armed domineering. Come on. Shiliu and Dai Peng flashed past, raising their famous swords and spears and stabbing them. For the two people who suddenly appeared and were close at hand, Li Qiye didn't look at them, tilted his head, and disappeared in place. Boom. The place where Molly was standing just now was smashed into a deep hole by Shiliu and Dai Peng. Where's the person? Dai Peng exclaimed, turning back to look for Molly. Boom, boom. With the two shots of Van Oka, everyone realized that Li Qiye had already jumped to the wolf's chest. Hey, Evil Wolf! Blackbeard hurriedly shouted to remind Evil Wolf. Ah, Navy! The wolf's huge fist smashed at Molly in midair. The vicious wolf's eyes were aimed at Molly. It was absolutely impossible for him to escape in midair. Blow me away, Navy! Molly twisted his body, dodged the bullet, held the handle of the knife with his right hand, looked at the fierce eyes of the evil wolf, grinned and shouted, the first one. The sword was drawn and swung horizontally, the sword light filled the sky, the huge white light slashed, met the fist of the evil wolf, and the knife cut tofu-like smoothness. The whole arm of the evil wolf, the shoulder to the head of the evil wolf, was directly cut open by Li Qiye. Scoff tilde. The huge battleship, San Juan, the wolf, died, the blood in the chest burst into the sky, and the beach and forest were stained with blood. Boom, boom, boom. The bullet with the sound of howling broke through the air, and the target was inseparable. Li Qiye fell from the sky, and while everyone was still stunned by the situation where Li Qiye killed the wolf, Van Oka in the forest woke up the sluggish crowd with 3 very quick shots. When Li Mo turned his head to dodge a bullet, and the remaining 2 bullets were blocked with a knife. Bah! Molly stood on top of a boulder with a knife, looked at the Blackbeards and said in a cold voice, no one will distract me today, so you should all die here. You are less arrogant, Navy. My dreams, my ambitions, have not been realized, how could I die? Blackbeard roared loudly. Wayhaha! Bashes leapt high into the air, steam bursting out of his shoulder-armored arm, and slammed into Li Qiye, who was standing on the stone. Swing, elbow. Hey, I'm a defeated general. Molly's left hand became a claw, and he took Boss's move. Boom. The huge shock wave exploded, and the two saw the airflow squeezed and exploded. Ah, you tough guy, Bashes shouted through gritted teeth, and then his other hand covered with a strong-armed color domineeringly smashed at Molly. When Molly crossed the knife to block. Do you have any other tricks? Molly said with a sneer. Good chance. Shiliu took advantage of the gap between Molly and Bashes, and the sword light flashed, and the strange blade slashed towards Molly's left waist. Molly smiled slightly. Good sir. Before he finished speaking, Molly grabbed Bash's shoulder armor with his left hand and dragged it down, and Bash's whole body was pressing down on Molly. With such a tug at Molly, Bassos lost his balance in an instant, and the whole person was blocked between Molly and Shiliu. Ah! Not good. The change of form between the electric light and flint made it impossible for Shiryu to change the direction with all his strength. When a slash with a strange blue light shot up into the sky. I don't know when, Blackbeard appeared beside Shiryu, and the domineering claw knife covered with armament lifted Shiryu's blade towards Bash's in a critical moment. Bang! The boulder under Molly's feet could no longer bear the force of several people pouring out, and it shattered into stones. Then look up. Molly raised his eyebrows, looked at the Blackbeard in front of him and smiled. Yo, your strength and speed are not bad. Humph. Dark water. Tiki wrapped the darkness with one hand and attacked Li Kie. Okay, I'll try it. Limo was also the hand of darkness that slammed into Blackbeard with one hand. Scoff tilde tilde. Ha, Blackbeard was also staggered back by Molly's tremendous force. Ha, Molly felt that the power he blasted out was lost in the darkness in Tiki's hands as if he was attracted by the darkness. Hey, it's interesting, I absorbed the power, but I didn't fully absorb it. Is it because I am not a devil fruit person? Try again. After speaking, Li Kie withdrew his fist and slashed down at Blackbeard. The slashing slash shot out instantly, and the bright white blade light cut through the darkness. Teach, who was a few steps away, rolled up a dark tornado behind him and handed out a large amount of black mist to block the blade. Li Kie didn't see if Blackbeard could resist. He looked down at Basas who was struggling under his feet. You monster, Bashas said horribly, rubbing the sand on his face. Molly squinted his eyes. Really? The blade turned down, and the light of the knife slid across Bas's neck. The Blackbeard Pirates, Basas, is dead. Chapter 95. Unbridled Laughter. The death of Basas did not arouse the grief and anger of the pirate group Blackbeard. How could they care about the lives and deaths of others when they were too busy to take care of themselves? Shiryu's demon sword condensed a high concentration of armament and domineering, trying his best to help Blackbeard resist Molly's slash, while Blackbeard fully used the dark gravity to dispel Molly's slash. Ruiyu Hunter Daipeng and the evil ruler Abaro Pizarro looked at each other, and both of them could see their determination in each other's eyes. The death of the wolf and Basas, and the blood stained on the long sword of Molly, clearly told them that this man standing with the sword would not let them go, not to mention that the two of them were advancing the city. Escaped felon. At this moment, Molly threw away the blood from the blade, looking at the black-bearded Tiki, who was gasping for breath after the power of the slash had been resolved. Molly pursed his lips. There seems to be some kind of special gravitational and devouring power. Just as Molly stared at Blackbeard in a daze, Daipeng had flashed to Molly's right side. His spear was armed with a domineering look. Go to hell. Daipeng's stern voice was high-pitched and sharp, and the pitch-black spear was aimed at Molly's neck. When Molly raised the knife and blocked it, the pitch-black tip of the spear pressed against the silver-white flowing knife. Yo, you should attack from the left, I'm holding the knife in my right hand. Molly squinted at Daipeng and laughed lightly. Bang bang bang. After a series of gunshots, the evil political king fired several shots at Molly. Molly's body moved back a little bit, and the bullet wrapped in armed color brushed against Molly's shirt. At this time, Daipeng had also stepped back and jumped into the air. Molly took a quick glance. The half-dead guy on the horse and the drunk man with the wine gourd on his back didn't make a move. There was a birdman staring at him in midair. Limo sighed. It seemed that it would take some effort to clean them up. Violent murder, in an instant. Limo glanced at Lafayette who was flying in the air, and then smiled at Titch. Titch instinctively felt that this guy's murderous intention was rising again. Black fog appeared on his right hand, and his left hand was covered with a strong armed color and domineering, rushing towards Li Kie. Molly, take this trick from me. Molly bared his teeth in a funny way, and then with a bang, he rose to the ground. As soon as Tiki hit the air, he turned his head to look at everyone. He was looking for who Li would be by his side, and he wanted to rescue him as soon as possible. Blackbeard suddenly looked up suddenly. Yo-hoo, what's the name of my little brother? In a flash, Li Qian appeared in front of Lafayette, grabbed Lafayette's name with his left hand, and fell straight to the ground. Boom! Before the 2 meters of smoke had cleared, Basque Choate, the drinker, rushed into the dust with a domineering look in his arms. Just listening to the sound of the collision, Li Qian was knocked out of the smoke by Choate. Mo flew more than 4 feet upside down, plowed the ground with both feet, and carved 2 sand trenches on the beach. Li Mo patted his right shoulder and said, "You're not very tall, but you're quite energetic." "Lafayette, are you okay?" Blackbeard stared at Mo Li, shouting, anxiously confirming Lafayette's situation. "No, it's all right." Choate came just in time. The dust cleared, and Choate stepped out of the bunker with Lafayette on his shoulders. "Cough cough. Poison Q, come and help me." Lafayette coughed twice and turned to look at Poison Q. Li did not stop Poison Q from treating Lafayette, but turned to look at Jack, who was dying. Even Mo Li couldn't help but marvel. The resilience and vitality of animal-type devil fruits are really powerful. No, it is better to say that people in this world have a kind of powerful and twisted vitality. Blackbeard was also secretly calculating at this time. Li Mo's monster-like fighting power was something they were incapable of fighting against now, and if this stalemate continued, they would die sooner or later. And now the pirate ship is on the coast not far behind Mo Li, and it is impossible to cross Mo Li and board the ship to escape. The wolf was also killed by him. They seem to have fallen into a desperate situation, forbearance for many years to get to the current Tiki step by step, despite being cornered by a navy at this moment. Although his heart was filled with anger and unwillingness, his reason told Blackbeard that he needed to negotiate, and he needed ships to exchange opportunities for students. Tiki began to retreat slowly, and the pirates also slowly moved closer to Tiki's side. Without any words or actions, Li Qian stood silently on the spot because he had changed his mind a little. In this group of people, judging from the current situation, if they couldn't pierce the heart or stab the head with one blow, the ship doctor would be there. Will be treated. And there is also a guy who hides in the dark and puts cold guns, which is as annoying as a fly. We have to deal with the ship doctor and sniper first, otherwise it will be a bit annoying. Mo Li. Titch's loud roar awakened Li Qian's dazed thinking. Huh? Mo Li asked curiously, does he still have a last word? Leave us alone. Huh? Mo Li licked his ears and looked at Blackbeard in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about at this time? Titch, say it again, I don't understand. Ha 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 ha, Mo Li, let us go, don't you want to fight with Big Mom and Kaido? There's no need to spend time with us here. Blackbeard tried to use Big Mom and Kaido to put pressure on him to persuade Mo Li. In his opinion, the 2 sovereigns were powerful enough to let the monster, Mo Li, get tired of dealing with it. With a little bit of intention, you can get a life. Li Mo looked at the Blackbeards in a strange way, and after watching them think for a moment, he said, no, it's really not a waste to fight with you. Can count as a game. Quote. Mo Li ignored Blackbeard Tiki's gloomy expression. He paused and grinned at the enemy in front of him, a game of cat and mouse. Li Mo looked at Blackbeard and the others with a joking smile, and continued, your fruit ability is very interesting. I heard that you used to be a crew member of Whitebeard, forbearing and dormant for many years, just to realize your ambition one day, and this devil the fruit is one step towards your ambition. Quote. I have to say, Tiki, you are the most like a pirate of all the pirates I have ever seen. Unlike other fool pirates, you are a conspiracy, forbearance, decisiveness, cruelty, ambition and righteousness. The one who never misses the slightest opportunity. Quote. But people like you are the most hateful and most dangerous. You have no fetters and worries, and you do things ruthlessly, so you should die, or you will cause a lot of trouble when you are strong. Blackbeard watched Mo Li finish saying these words, and after a stunned 2 seconds, he suddenly burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, Mo Li, people's dreams will never end. Be swallowed by the darkness. Mo Li, the dark cave. Fighting for life, endless darkness swept the entire island in an instant, black mist tornadoes reflected the sky, and Blackbeard's unbridled laughter resounded under the dark sky. Chapter 96. Rabbit Dead Fox Sadness. Brothers, work hard. The vegetation, sand and rocks on the island, including the dying jack of the drought, were swallowed up and squeezed by the darkness. The darkness shrinks and belongs to Titch's own. At this moment, the Blackbeard pirates choose to face this powerful monster in their hearts under the unavoidable circumstances. Liberation. The black mist tornado behind Blackbeard reappeared, and all the things absorbed instantly protruded and slammed down towards Li Qiye. Kill him. Everyone's weapons were covered with a strong domineering aura, rushing towards Li Qiye. Moli indifferently looked at the gravel and tree soil that he wanted to suppress. His wrists trembled slightly, he lifted his saber, and smashed the sky with a slashing slash. At the same time, the force of the blade remained unabated, and the blade swayed across the chest. When the tip of Shiliu's pitch-black demon blade dripped on the body of Moli's blade. Hey, you really are a monster. Shiliu looked at Moli and cursed after the blow failed. Die. The evil King Pizarro appeared above Moli with his arms folded and his hands clasped together, and slammed down on Moli. Between the lightning and flint, Li Qiye kicked Fei Shiliu and blocked the evil king with a horizontal knife. Boom. Under the strange power of the evil King Pizarro, the beach under Li Qiye's feet was deep, and the two fell into the sand pit. Everyone is watching the situation in the dust. Ah, damn it, Tiki. After the shrill screams of the evil king, under the suspicious eyes of the Blackbeards on the beach, Li Qiye grabbed the evil King Pizarro by the neck, dragged his body out of the sandpit, raised his left arm lightly, and Pizarro Luo's body was thrown at Blackbeard's feet. Poison Q. Hey, Poison Q. Blackbeard hurriedly shouted. Poison Q groped and checked for a while, then looked at Blackbeard and said, "He's dead." Blackbeard nodded and stopped talking. He looked back at the man who was standing on the beach, blocking their way. The wolf, Bassos, and Pizarro just now died in his hands, with pure killing intent. Easy to kill them. Is the power gap really that big? There is no way out. Blackbeard said solemnly. Moli stared at the few people with their fingers moving slightly, the blade trembled slightly, and exhaled a turbid breath. Birdman, it's you. The breeze blew, and Moli disappeared on the spot. In an instant, blood burst out. When everyone was stunned, Lafayette's head rolled off. Moli's castration continued unabated, and the mysterious operation of Blackbeard's dark cave sweeping the island also exposed Sniper Van Oka. The whole island was bare, and Van Oka was unavoidable. The sniper's keen intuition and senses made Van Oka instinctively feel dangerous, and he fired 3 shots at the place where he had just been while he retreated. Boom, boom, boom. Limo also appeared in the hidden place where he was just as Van Oka had judged. The sonic bullets wrapped in the domineering look of armed force broke through the air, and Moli kicked his legs and rose into the air, but at this time Dai Peng and Chao Te killed him. The spears and iron fists attacked left and right. Moli didn't show any signs of panic. He kicked out his right leg and hit Chote in front of the door. The wine tycoon, Chote, fell to the ground like a meteor, smashing into the ground and causing a tall smoke. At the same time, he grabbed Dai Peng's spear with his left hand, pulled it with his left hand, and bent his knees and slammed into Dai Peng. Ouch! Dai Peng vomited blood from his mouth under the blow of Moli's knee. After tossing and turning, the two of them landed, and Li Shuiliang put the blade on Dai Peng's shoulder and said coldly, "I heard that you like to collect the heads of beautiful girls." The hair on Dai Peng's body suddenly rose, and the cold light of the blade was so real that he was terrified. At this time, the only thing he could rely on was the sense of security given by the armed color domineering armor. Armed. Scoff tilde tilde. Dai Peng's ridiculously long nose and ugly face rolled to the ground with an expression of panic and fear. Damn Navy. The rabbit died and the fox was sad. The people who escaped from the 6th floor of the advanced city and took refuge in Blackbeard, Pizarro, Dai Peng, and the wolf were all dead, and the wine tycoon Chote roared. He grabbed the wine gourd behind him and poured the spirits into his mouth. It wasn't just a secret trick or a self-inflicted tension. Blackbeard and the others didn't stop Chote's behavior. On the bare island, there were several headless corpses, and the man drinking beside the corpse made the assassin a little sad. Limo looked at him without any movement, thinking secretly in his heart, Titch, and that rebel, sniper, half-dead doctor, alcoholic. The person who could help them escape was dead, and the pirate ship had been blown away by the aftermath of the battle. At this time, the island was no different from a cage. His companions were killed by Moli one after another. The island was like a prison, and his abilities had no effect on the incompetent Moli. At this time, Blackbeard Tiki regretted that he was going to interfere with these things. The world is slowly grabbing the fruit ability. How can Marcos' remnants of the Whitebeard pirates be his opponents? Are you too anxious? Is today your end? In the face of a monster like Moli whose combat power even surpassed that of Whitebeard, he had no chance of winning. Titch stared at Moli and clenched his teeth tightly, thinking secretly in his heart, what to do, what to do. Bang! Suddenly, Chote shredded the huge wine gourd, and the originally drunk and confused eyes were instantly replaced by a pair of red and bloody pupils, the whole body swelled, and the muscles bulged. Death! Navy! Armed! Covered with domineering armament, Chote smashed the ground and rushed towards Moli with extreme speed. Moli's eyes moved slightly, just as Chote rushed in front of him, a white light flashed, and Moli swung the knife, and a pool of blood splashed on the ground. The dead winemaker Chote fell to the ground, and the incision was smoothed, extending from the left shoulder to the right abdomen. Li Kie didn't take care of Chote who was dead behind him, but walked towards Blackbeard with his saber in hand. Titch, the doctor, the sniper, and that Mr. Rebel, there are only 4 of you left. Limo said step by step. Blackbeard retreated in horror. The original arrogant smile was gone, replaced by fear, a powerless fear. Advance City, Moli, let's go to Advance City with you. Blackbeard hurriedly shouted, going to Advance City, you don't have to die for the time being, there will always be a way to get out when you go there. Ha ha. Moli was angrily laughed at by the Blackbeard, pointed at the Blackbeard and said, Tikis, you made a mess in the Advance City, there are not many people on the 6th floor, you don't even care. No one will keep you company when you go there. The words fell, and Moli didn't want to talk too much nonsense with them. With a flash of figure, he appeared in front of Blackbeard, with one hand and one knife, he raised his knife to fight. When? Scoff Tilda. Tiki, Shilyu, and Poison Q, the 3 of them worked together to block Moli's knife, and the blade was filled with chi. Blackbeard's hands trembled, he suddenly released his left hand, and his strength was unbalanced. Just cut to Poison Q's neck, the light of the knife swept past, and the head fell to the ground. Moli blinked. Hey, that's not my fault. Chapter 97, The Sharp Blade That Cuts Through the Darkness. Bang. When? He took Titch's punch with one hand, and held Shiryu's eye with a vertical knife. Under the combined attack of the 2 of them, Moli took advantage of the situation and flew all the way. Moli, who was flying in the air, twitched the corners of his mouth, stiffened his waist, touched the ground with his right foot, and disappeared in midair. The sniper Fan Oka, who was watching the battle from a distance behind a big rock, was startled. The moment Moli disappeared, his hair was cold, and his heart was full of alarm. In the process of no reaction, Van Oka instantly turned around and lifted the gun and pulled the trigger. Boom! One shot missed. Van Oka was half knelt on the ground, looking at Moli who was holding the gun body in fear, and met Moli's playful and indifferent eyes. Sigh tilde. The bloodline on the neck slowly seeped blood, and as more and more blood flowed out, Van Oka's eyes became empty and finally gray and dead. What Limo showed was not only crushing in strength, but also his combat IQ was extraordinary. With Van Oka's death, Shiryu's pupils shrank tightly. Ha ha ha, is that so? The scene before death. Shiryu laughed, but his eyes were neither happy nor sad. Perhaps at this moment, he understood the people he had killed in the Advanced City. Prisoner, what are you thinking about before dying? Shiliu stepped forward slowly, the demon knife slowly retracted into the scabbard, the eyes under the brim of the hat were strange and cold. Navy, come on. Lieutenant Lee dropped the sniper rifle in his hand, stepped over Van Oka's body, and walked towards Shiliu. You are not qualified to fight me formally, you are different from them, they have always been criminals, and you are nothing more than a traitor. Mo-Lee slowly approached Shiliu and said in a deep voice. A traitor, it seems to be, but it doesn't matter anymore. Shiliu grinned. In an instant, Ju He-Fei-Zan slashed at Mo-Lee with extreme speed, and the huge half-moon-shaped slash caused a turbulent flow on the ground, collecting sand and soil to form a hurricane. The demon sword had a strong domineering aura of armament, and Shiliu stabbed Mo-Lee like a slingshot arrow. In the face of the slashing attack that hit him, Mo-Lee swiped his sword lightly and smashed it away. Flip your wrist and lift the long knife upside down. The sword light flowed between Mo-Lee and Shiliu, the slashes scattered, and in just a split second, the two of them staggered. The sword is returned to its sheath. Ha ha, the strength is not in one dimension. Clang, the demon sword fell to the ground, and Shiliu died. Mo-Lily ignored Shiliu and continued to walk towards Blackbeard with his saber in hand. Titch, do you have any other means? Blackbeard Tiki no longer retreated. At this moment, he looked directly at Mo-Lee, his eyes no longer dodged. He was already standing on the edge of the cliff, and he could no longer think of any retreat. A large amount of black mist oozes out from Tiki's body, gradually covering the whole island. The moment the black mist touches the seawater, it turns into a black wall that rises into the sky and gradually wraps the island. Ha ha ha, Mo-Lee, this is the darkness, waiting to be swallowed by the darkness, squeezed, and then die. Titch's red eyes were full of madness, and his determination to fight back made him completely release the ability of the dark fruit. The dark walls around the island are still rising, obscuring the sky and covering the whole island. Looking from a distance, the island at this time is like a black giant egg, and the black fog keeps rising. Limo looked up at the sky where there was only a trace of light left but was quickly obscured. The snow-white blade of the saber in his hand slowly lit up with white fluorescence, and the chi flowing in the blade was the only light of dawn in this dark world. Tiki, when I saw you for the first time, I wanted to kill you. Remember, it was you Chihuahai, but the upper echelons always felt that you were useful. Stop me over and over again. The cooperation between officials and thieves. I'm going to die of laughter. Mo-Lee, a kid like you won't know how vast the sea is. The secret of this world, the great holy war is waiting for me. Tiki roared at Mo-Lee with a hoarse voice. He killed his brother and killed his father. When his ambition was finally realized, there was such a Navy officer who was born out of nowhere. He blocked the door. Ah, dark world. With Tiki's roar, the black fog covering the island is like tentacles, attacking Mo-Lee in all directions. In this dark space, Tiki is the ruler. In the darkness, there was only one spot of light, and Li Chi had no sense of domineering, and he could not perceive Titch's position. Li Li smiled casually. Like my father told me, no matter who is in the world, everyone has dreams and ambitions, but some dreams are too dangerous. The words fell, and Mo-Lee's fingers moved slightly, holding the saber smoothly, the tip of the blade breathed out the aura of a gleaming white sword. Feeling that the darkness under his feet was pulling him, Li Qian leapt into the air, and the light spots in the darkness instantly brightened. A bright slash like a full moon illuminates this dark world. From a distance, a black giant egg on the sea is split in half by a white light from top to bottom. After a long time, the darkness dissipated, the island was cut in half, and the split sea was gradually filled with sea water to heal. Mo-Lee put the knife in the sheath, walked slowly to the side of the black beard whose chest was cut off, crouched down and lit a cigar. By the way, there is AD in your name, do you know the secrets of this world, and what did you just say about the Great Holy War? Mo-Lee asked softly. Titch looked at the blue sky quietly, maybe he was remembering something when he was about to die. Cough cough cough. After a violent cough, he looked at Mo-Lee, did not answer Molly's question, but said enviously, "If I had the strength like you, it would be great." Molly smacked his lips, stood up, pulled out the scabbard and slashed the Blackbeard's neck. Marshall D. Teach, dead. Sitting on the rocks on the shore smoking a cigarette for a while, looking at the endless sea, it seems that there are unimaginable dangers hidden under the calm. "Hey, I just think too much." Muttering to himself, Lily stood up and looked around the island. It was such a nameless island that it became the burial place of the Blackbeards. Suddenly, Molly's eyebrows twitched. "Damn it, where's the big stupid elephant?" Molly looked left and right, except for Blackbeard's corpse, which was a mess of rubble and disfigured vegetation ravaged by Blackbeard. Jack was not seen. "I'm going. Will this guy be crushed to death by Titch's darkness?" Blue blue, blue blue. The phone bug on Lee's wrist rang. "Huh, who is it?" "Katja." "Hello. Molly, where are you?" "The old man has arrived at Mocha Island." The phone bug imitated the appearance of the yellow monkey and said to Molly. Molly scratched his head and said, "I kicked the big stupid elephant into the air, I'm here to find him." "Is that found?" "No, it may have died." Lee Mo said. "Oh, if that's the case, then you should come back first." Katja. After hanging up the phone, Molly sighed lightly. "Da stupid elephant, I'm really sorry, if you didn't talk shit, would you be able to live?" After saying that, Lee Kie stepped on the sea and ran away. Chapter 98, Learning Dumb Language. After 3 or 4 hours of lost journey, Limo finally returned to Mocha Island under the guidance of 3,000 phone calls. "The first thing I did when I returned to Mocha Island was to eat." After a fight with the Blackbeards, and after running back and forth for several hours, Lee Kie was really hungry. In a restaurant by the sea, the area is about 300 square meters, and the exquisite decoration of the white tone theme complements the appropriate decorations. Molly liked this restaurant built by the sea. When he turned his head, he saw the sparkling blue sea, and the waves were constantly washing the beach. In Molly's words, beauty and food are the best match. Sitting across from Molly, Sanchian watched Molly eat a large piece of bone in just a few bites, and he didn't even need a fourth bite for the palm-sized steak. Sanchin was a little surprised why Molly ran out, and when he came back, he was hungry and his clothes were dirty, but now it was time for Molly to eat, so Sanchin held back and didn't ask any more questions. Seeing Molly who was gobbling down, Sanchin poured him a glass of water. "Drink some water and eat slowly." "Ooh," Molly nodded, took a sip from the cup, and started eating again. Compared with 3,000 who couldn't bear to disturb Molly's meal, the old man of the yellow monkey didn't care so much, his eyes squinted and his mouth pouted. "Molly, you promised the old man that you wouldn't cause trouble." Molly's cheeks were bulging, he glanced at Kizaru, nodded, then shook his head again, and finally shook his chin towards the port. "Yeah, silly." Huang Yuan looked at Molly with a dazed expression on his face. 3,000 on the side quickly explained. "Molly means that he promised you not to cause trouble, but they messed with me first. If you don't believe me, see." After saying 3,000, he pointed to Smoothie. Huang Yuan looked at Sanchian strangely, and then looked at Molly. "Is Sanchian right?" Li Kie didn't look at Huang Yuan, just nodded, meaning that Sanchin was right. "Oh," Kizaru glanced at Sanchin, who was a little proud and had a small mouth, and he was a little surprised. "Did Molly speak?" Nodding and shaking his head is talking, but why can 3,000 translate so much? Then, Huang Yuan nodded and said, "The pressure of the naval headquarters is a bit high. Now, in this situation, it is necessary to passively fight the 2-4 emperors, and the manpower cannot be deployed at all." After Huang Yuan finished speaking, Molly raised his head and blinked at Huang Yuan, then lowered his head to cook. Huang Yuan pouted and looked at Sanchian. Sanchin pondered for a few seconds, then said softly, "Molly means, he didn't expect this to happen, but there is no way, these pirates are too arrogant, and he himself couldn't hold back for a while." Sanchin paused and added, be sure to pay attention next time. After hearing what Sanchin said, Huang Yuan hurriedly looked at Mo Li, who nodded. She was right. Huh, Huang Yuan was shocked. You just blinked twice, can you translate so much? With some kind of anticipation in his heart, Kizaru said quickly, Kuzan and Sakazuki took people to intercept Big Mom and Kaido, and we too acted as support mobile units, ready to reinforce them at any time. Mo Li paused, then shook his head. Come. Huang Yuan hurriedly looked at Sanchin, and now Mo Li shook his head. I'll see how you translate it. Seeing Huang Yuan looking at him, Sanchian said without hesitation, don't be so troublesome. If you intercept it, you may not be able to intercept it. It's better to let them come directly and concentrate your forces to kill them together. After hearing what Sanchin said, Kizaru nodded, and his mind was wide open. It turned out that he could say so many words just by shaking his head. Kizaru took a breath, looked at the ceiling, and after a long silence, he finally organized the language. The sea is very chaotic now. Whitebeard is dead, his territory is in a mess, and now the 4 emperors are dispatched. People all over the world are paying attention to the movements here. The sea can no longer be chaotic. This time our combat mission, yes, not allowing them to see that the Navy has the strength to take on the 2 of them will make them terrified and maybe form an alliance. Quote. Better let them kill each other and consume each other in the new world. We'd better intercept one and take on one. After finishing speaking, Huang Yuan stared straight at Mo Li. Mo Li was eating, raised the fork in his hand and swung it, then shook his head, nodded, and after a pause, he shook his head slightly. Wow, there's a lot of action this time. Kizaru turned his head to look at Sanchin. Sanchin added some water to the cup in front of Mo Li, then smiled at Huang Yuan and said, I see. Ah. Huang Yuan looked at Sanchian in disbelief and pointed at Li Qiye, who was eating. 3000, Mo Li did a lot of action just now. I know. Sanchin looked at Kizaru with a strange look in his eyes. Then why did you translate a sentence? Kazuna asked. Sanchin said as a matter of course, what he means is, I know. It's amazing, Kizaru said with a sigh. After a wave of barrier-free communication, Huang Yuan also satisfied his curiosity, and Mo Li was also full. Remove the empty bowl and lay out a new tablecloth. After the 3000 left, Lieutenant General Gumir sat next to him. Kizaru, Mo Li, Gumir, the 3 of them drank coffee and had a small meeting. Mo Li took a sip of coffee, looked at Huang Yuan, and said, that means one of the generals will drag one person and then concentrate on dealing with the other person. Huang Yuan nodded. It's almost, because the incident happened suddenly, so the warring states did not make more arrangements, and for the time being, we can only deal with it first. Ha, it's really a big chain event. Gumir said with a smile while holding his coffee. Kizaru glanced at Gumir, and said to Mo Li, it's almost going to collide in a day or 2. Li Mo shrugged. It's not my fault. Who asked them to mess with me first? After thinking about it, he added, do you still want the elephant tusk? Kizaru said, isn't the ivory broken from Jack's mouth? Yes. Jack is a man. Aang, isn't that also an elephant? After saying that, Mo Li leaned back, lit a cigar, and said thoughtfully, then who are the 2 of them mainly dealing with? Mo Li was a little impatient. Why are there so many things? Why don't you just pack them together? But Huang Yuan shook his head. How can it be so simple? There are many transactions and forces under them, involving many people and countries. If they are there, they can be deterred, but if they are not there, those big pirates and countries will happen. Unrest. Mo Li pouted. If people can't afford the gold in the sky, they can't count as a member country. Oh, does Jun Mo Li also know about this? Mo Li said angrily, I'm not a fool. Chapter 90, 9th, True Drilling Scenes. In the afternoon, Li Qiye leaned against the port board, watching the batches of people evacuating. His eyes never rested. The quality of beauties in this world is much better than that of hometown, and they dress very boldly and show very politeness. Molly winked at several beauties, and the beauties also gave face very much, raising their eyebrows in response to Molly. This made Molly a little excited. If he hadn't had to wait for 2 sand sculptures to come over to fight, maybe he would have been able to operate a wave with the crush. However, there are also many women with strange shapes. It is like the eldest sister who is more than 3 meters tall and has a wide mouth and a wide nose, but she wears a pink and tender dress. Does she not ask if the dress is willing? Behind him came a group of people pulling a big box, standing beside Li Qian in a hustle and bustle, waiting to board the boat. Li Qian glanced at the crowd curiously, paused for a while on a few people, and then nodded. There are also good talents in this group of people. Suddenly I saw a little girl clutching a bag of biscuits, standing timidly beside a woman's legs. The woman stretched her neck and looked around. Molly blinked and turned to look at the sea. When he looked at the little girl a few seconds later, he found that the little girl was also looking at him. Li Qian stretched out his hand to the little girl. The little girl looked at Molly with watery eyes, took out a biscuit from the biscuit bag and put it in Molly's palm. Li Mo put the biscuit into his mouth. Crunch. Still licking his lips, Li Qian stretched out his hand again. The little girl foolishly put another piece in Molly's palm. Coconut milk flavored cookies. Reach out again. Crunchy, cookie baked just right. Reach out. Not bad good, so delicious. This time the outstretched hand had no biscuits. Li Mo turned his head to look at the little girl, and saw the girl's mouth slumped, her big eyes filled with mist, and the little fat man swayed the bag up and down, and said in a milky voice, "No more." Molly pouted, really couldn't help eating. "Ashima, we're on the boat," the woman suddenly said, pulling the little girl to leave. "Hey, that kid," Li Mo shouted. The little girl's mother paused and quickly bowed to Molly. "Gulu." Molly looked at the little girl's mother, from this angle. "Lord Navy, may I ask what Ashima did wrong? I can." It's okay. Molly looked back, waved his hand and said, "I ate her biscuits." Li Mo took out a gold coin and handed it to the little girl. "Take it." No, the woman quickly waved her hand to refuse. "Take it, I'm a Navy man. How can you take a stab at the masses?" Li Mo was an old rogue. Thank you, Lord Navy." The woman took the gold coin and ran away with the little girl in her arms. "Hey, Lao Su is the one who eats free food. Sit for a while." "Hey." After watching the last batch of refugees get on the boat, Molly sighed, looking at the blue sea and blue sky, and murmured to himself, "I miss Hanzu Gurgur." At this time, Sanchin came over, sat beside Li Mo, hugged his knees and asked softly, "What are you looking at?" Hearing this, Li Qian shook his head, turned his eyes to Sanchin's wrist, and asked, "Is it better?" Sanchin nodded and gave a low hum. She looked at the sea and said after a moment of silence, "I don't know if it will cause you trouble." Molly was stunned for a moment, looking at San Qian's fair face. He felt the urge to pinch. He asked, "What troubles you?" With a faint sigh, Sanchin said, "You are going to fight those 2 monsters. It must be very dangerous. I want to go." Although Molly promised herself that she would take her in the next war, she was still afraid that her weakness would bring trouble to Molly, and that Molly would be distracted and injured by taking care of her. Sanchin pursed his lips, turned his head to look directly into Molly's eyes, and said firmly, "I want to help you, even if I look at it from a distance. At least I can know that you are safe for the first time. It's hard to wait for someone, especially you." Molly suddenly turned his head and stared at San Qian dazedly. Sanchin lowered her head in a panic, and the halo refracted by the sea level hit her fair little face, giving her the feeling of a pink baby face. Molly couldn't hold back, and leaned over to give him a kiss. "Ah, you, what are you doing?" Sanchin raised her head suddenly. She was frightened by Molly's kiss. Although she had already expressed her intentions, she really couldn't stand the sudden attack. "I'm sorry, I really couldn't hold back. Hey, where are you going? Don't burrow into the ground. Molly just wanted to explain, but Sanchian was more shy than he imagined. The Sanchian sitting on the big rock directly activated his ability, and the whole person directly penetrated the big rock and disappeared in front of Molly's eyes. Fuck, is there such an operation? The ability of 3000 to really drill into the ground really shocked Limo. If this is where to eat the overlord meal, and run away after eating and drinking, it is simply invincible. Sanchin ran away shyly, and Li Qiye didn't think that the knife would do this, so he blamed Sanchin. Why did he tempt him in the daytime? Recalling the experience of the past few days, Molly sighed, as if he really caused trouble. The big stupid elephant was the one who took the initiative to provoke him, and the big long legs was the cannon he fired at others first. Can't blame people. Now the life and death of the big stupid elephant is unknown, but at least 2 tusks are left. What about the long legs? Limo glanced at Smooch, who was tied to the port, and felt a little sorry for her. She didn't eat or drink, and she slept in the open air everywhere. Hey, after all, I'm still soft-hearted. I can't abuse a girl. In the cafe, because the people from Mocha Island had all evacuated, Kizaru stayed in the empty cafe, waiting for orders. Hi, Lao Sa, Limo greeted, pulled out the chair and sat down. Oh, Mo Li, what's the matter with you? Huang Yuan asked. Limo nodded, pointed to Smoggy at the port and said, you're such a big man, and he's still a woman, so it's not good to be tied there. Then what is Mo Li Jun going to do? Huang Yuan asked suspiciously. Mo Li pondered for a moment and said, shut up in the advanced city, where can you eat or sleep? It's better than the port here. Ah, does Jun Mo Li really think so? Yes, send someone to deliver it. Just treat her as if I let her go. Li Mo nodded. Hee, Mo Li Jun's kindness, I think she will be grateful to you. Huang Yuan looked at Mo Li, and the word gratitude was particularly heavy. Li Mo waved his hand, hey, I'm still too soft-hearted. When Smoothie was taken on the warship, he wanted to die. He had been boiled for 2 days, and his mother was about to arrive. Did you send me into the Push City? So why did you go in the first place? Mo Li, you wait to be run over by your mother. Seeing the grateful eyes that Smooch looked at him, Limo nodded and said with emotion, no need to thank me, I treat women like a very gentleman. Chapter 100, Ben Beckman. Turn around. The torrential rain that started last night has stopped in the early morning, but the raindrops are intertwined in strands. Molly and Huang Yuan were sitting by the window, 2 cups of steaming coffee were placed on the table in front of them. Huang Yuan took a sip of coffee, looked at Molly and said, according to the report of the branch sentinel, Kaido's trace has been found, and they have reached the Great Route. Molly nodded, perfunctory Kizaru. When will Kaido and the others come? Limo is really not interested, anyway, just wait for them to come, and it's over. Seeing that Molly was so obviously perfunctory to himself, Huang Yuan didn't care. After all, it was not the first time that he changed his words. What do you think of Kuzan and Sakasuke's battle for the position of admiral? Look at it with your eyes. Limo replied weakly. Oh, don't you want to support one of them? Molly took a sip of coffee and stuck out his tongue bitterly. Seeing that the rain had stopped outside, he stood up and walked out, saying at the same time, I have something to do with me. If you want to be a marshal, I will support you. Quote. Ha, say something that people can't understand. Huang Yuan looked at Molly, who was out of the door, and shook his head with a smile. Although he knew that Molly wouldn't care about these things, Huang Yuan still thought it would be better to confirm it in person. Now Aokiji and Akainu are fighting a bit fiercely. If it wasn't for Molly's trouble with these things, it wouldn't be impossible for the two to fight. Jimmy, if there is a war on Mocha Island, you will arrange Xiaoduding to be sent away on a warship. If there is a war on other islands, you will throw Xiaoduding to the Mediterranean uncle, and then you will follow me. Jimmy's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, can I join the war too? Limo smiled. Let's watch the fun. Well, that's okay, I remember it. Jimmy happily agreed to Molly. Jimmy is very envious that 3,000 can participate in the war, but her current strength is already far behind that of 3,000, so she does not dare to ask Molly to participate in the war. One is that he is afraid of dragging him down, and the other is that he is afraid that Molly will reject him. In the slave trade shop in the Chambord Islands, a fat manager wearing a monocle is saying to Doflamingo with a flattering smile, "My lord, there is a strong demand for mermaids from the powerful people of various countries recently." This slave shop is Doflamingo's business. After listening to the manager's report, Doflamingo remained silent and tapped the table with his fingers. The fat manager, who was hunched over and waiting for instructions, became heavier and heavier with the sound of Doflamingo's fingers tapping again and again. Doflamingo's ruthlessness in his bones made him tremble. Do not allow Doflamingo's attitude. Huh. Doflamingo, who finally reacted, glanced at the fat manager. Hum. The population business is out, idiot. The store will give it to you, Gerard. Ah, Mr. Doflamingo. The fat manager Gerard looked at Doflamingo in shock. Ha. The trend of the times is smile. After this war, it's time to prepare for a full-scale war. Hum. Gerard, don't contact me again. Doflamingo walked out of the slave trade in a pink feather coat and peace shoes. There is a winter island called Dolly Island between the northeast of Chengtu Island and Chambord. In the icy and snowy cave, a group of pirates gathered here. Boss, Kaido is about to arrive at Rabbit Island. After the man finished speaking, all the pirates in the cave looked at a domineering man with red hair and one arm. Is it almost there? Shanks said slowly, looking up. Shanks, what are you going to do? Ben Beckman, who was smoking a cigarette, looked at Shanks and asked. Shanks pondered for a moment, drank the bowl of wine in front of him, and said, then stop Kaido from going to war with the Navy. Not yet, said Ben Beckman. Shanks turned his head to look at Ben Beckman and asked suspiciously, why? Beckman breathed out a breath of smoke and put it on his lips again, and said slowly, it will take 2 days to get to Mocha Island from Chambord. Judging from the deployment of Rabbit Island, it should be the Navy's troops who intercepted the two of them. And it takes 10 hours at the fastest to get to any of the 2 islands from Mocha Island, where Limo is located. Also, according to my analysis, Li Kie has overwhelming combat power. His combat power is even higher than yours, Shanks. So which island Mo Li goes to, there will be a decisive battle situation. Shanks, what you want is balance. Wait for the man who uncovers all the secrets, then you can't let Li kill either of the two. Shanks pondered for a moment and said, but the Navy's Aokiji, Akainu, and Kyabu are already stationed on Yinkudong Island, Rabbit Island, and Mocha Island. No matter which island the war is on, it will definitely be fought within 10 hours. Rushed to support. Ben Beckman nodded, threw the cigarette butt into the fire, lit another, took a breath, looked at Shanks and said, then it's on Katla Island. This island is very close to us. While Akainu will arrive in 3 hours, Aokiji and Kyabu will take a day. Quote. Ben Beckman paused for a while, then said after pondering, stop Kaido first. Don't worry about the old lady's side. After we start, Akainu from Long Rabbit Island, Moli from Mocha Island, and Kyabu will all come here. Quote. The Yinkudong Island that the old woman went to is guarded by Aokiji. Let them fight. Let's stop Kaido, this lunatic, and fight back to the New World. Then Moli and Kizaru will turn their heads in the air and go to support Aoyasu. It's been 2 days since the pheasant. After Ben Beckman's analysis, all the red-haired pirates, including Shanks, looked at Beckman with their eyes wide open. At this moment, stupid Shanks has become a supporting role. Beckman, it's my greatest luck to have you as my partner. Shanks laughed and tapped Ben Beckman on the shoulder. Ben Beckman grinned with a cigarette in his mouth. You idiot. Everyone is planning, and the characters associated with this event are looking forward to another big battle after Whitebeard's death. Holy Land Mary Joa. Boom. One of the 5 old stars, the 5 old stars wearing a kimono and holding a sword, hit the ground with a long sword. Twisting his brows, an old voice sounded, "This sudden incident was caused by Molly again." Big Crescent Who's old man continued, "Big Mom doesn't matter. If Kaido is defeated, he will send someone to take over Wano Kingdom. After all, there are weapons and a lot of sea towers there." One of them also said, "Don Quixote's kid seems to be involved. Humph. Troubled identity. How should it be dealt with?" The 5 old stars with yellow beards and yellow hair pondered for a moment and said, "Contact the red hair, stop Kaido first, and keep Don Quixote's kid. As for the Big Mom, contact Huang Yuan and let him teach her a lesson with Limo." Recently, the Giants have been very dissatisfied with Big Mom. "Well, contact CP0 to prepare."